Is that a daft question?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I think, there's a big debate on both, and people have actually, we had quite a hot debate about which one we wanted to go for. We ended up going local currency. But there is some attraction in that exposure at the moment. You're just getting a bit of a yield pickup, and maybe you should find, and as we've seen already today, that emerging market central banks have still got some room to cut as well. It's a little bit of a sort of an uncorrelated position in a sense. It's one of the ways that we've added to performance in the last few months.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you so much for joining me on radio. Really good to speak to you. So that is Will Hobbs, who is the CIO at Barclays, joining me in the London radio studio, and he's also on Bloomberg Television, of course. I'll just give you an update now as we head into European trading hours. We're beginning in 3 minutes' time, of course. Euro Stoxx 50 futures right now down 0.25%. FTSE 100 futures also weaker this hour, but so too are US futures. S&P 500 down 0.3% after we've had this very negative equity trading session over in Asia, particularly centered around Hong Kong. Not much movement in the FX space. I'll give you a check on WTI crude futures, $58.11, Brent crude at 63.77. But we're going to delve into all the sectors and the stocks that are moving this Friday morning here in Europe in just a moment. This is Bloomberg.
We just got back from a beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Next, we donned our skates for Bath on Ice. I'm a natural. Didn't have to hold on to anything. Or anyone. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
There's a growing threat from Moscow Centre, and Britain's intelligence service think they've found the man for the job.
The natural-born agent runner is his own man. He may take his orders from London, but in the field, he is the master of his fate and the fate of his agents.
A powerful portrait of our times, told with unflagging tension by one of the greatest novelists of our age, John le Carré's Agent Running in the Field. Available now at Waterstones.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe for this Friday, the 29th of November in London. Coming up this hour.
Stocks slide into month-end, and China's biggest listing since 2015 struggles with waning investor interest.
And Morgan Stanley ousts FX traders who allegedly concealed up to $140 million of losses.
Donald Trump makes a surprise visit to Afghanistan, and the Conservative Party is riled after an ice block replaces Boris Johnson in a climate change debate. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And downbeat data, Indian markets brace for the worst GDP performance in over 6 years. We're live in Mumbai this hour.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Naira Chahich. Good morning, everyone. It's coming up to 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. I would say happy Friday, but we're seeing a little bit of a down day in risk assets, Caroline. Could be a little bit of a month-end portfolio repositioning, but also, of course, we're still waiting for any real clarity on US-China. We are heading for a third month of gains in global equities, though.
Yeah, exactly. And also we've had a fantastic run-up, has got to be said, in European equities, even though we've seen this slump today in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng down, some 2%. MSCI Hong Kong index also dropped earlier.
Yeah, a little bit of breaking news coming through from the BOJ, the December 10 to 25-year JGB auction size at 50 billion to 150 billion yen. It was at 50 to 200 billion, so a little bit lighter there than expected. I mean, we have also had some downbeat data coming through from Japan generally this week, and looking ahead to some downbeat data from India. So again, the question becomes, what's the outlook for 2020? We have actually had some really upbeat European equity outlooks, Caroline, for 2020. You've had it from Goldman Sachs, from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Barclays. The question is, what is going to be enough from phase one to push equities globally even higher?
Yeah, indeed. 420, 460 on the US stock 600. Some of the predictions. We're currently trading this morning at 407 spot 57. So we dropped 0.4% on the US stock 600.
Yeah, we're 2 minutes into the equity market open, and that is where the benchmark is set up, down 0.4%. So we're down for a second day, and actually the declines are more pronounced than what we saw yesterday in the stock 600 as we dropped just 0.1%. The day before that, we closed within 1% of a record Europe's equity benchmark. Looking across regional benchmarks, it's a picture of red on the screen. FTSE 100 down 0.6%, CAC 40 down 0.4%, the DAX down 0.5%, the IBEX and FTSE MIB down 0.2% and 0.3% respectively. Of course, US stock and bond markets were closed for Thanksgiving yesterday, and it's a half day of trading today. Futures on the back foot for a second day in the US. S&P, NASDAQ and Dow futures all lower by at least 0.3%. We're really not getting much indication at all from the Treasury market. The 10-year yield sitting steady on a 177 handle. The 10-year bund yield goes nowhere at negative 36, and the 10-year gilt yield at 68 basis points also going nowhere. We've had a pretty good run for the dollar, 8 days of gains. We did hit a 6-week high this week on that, and it's the longest run of gains since March. Steady on the Bloomberg dollar index today. We've seen a little bit of weakness in the Korean won. The Bank of Korea held steady, but it cut its growth forecast. But generally in G10, it's fairly quiet. The Kiwi and Aussie dollar leading gains. Taking a look at the oil market, so we are heading for a 4th week of gains ahead of OPEC Plus, but today we were weaker earlier. We've recouped some of the losses. WTI and Brent trading flat. WTI at $58.15 a barrel. Brent at $63.81.
So those are the markets. Let's have a look at what stocks to watch though this morning. Bloomberg stocks reporter Ksenia Gluchko is in our London studio. Good morning. E.ON raising its 2019 guidance on the acquisition of Innogy. Tell us more.
That's right. Yes, some really nice news for E.ON shareholders. The stock is up 1.2%. As you correctly said, they are boosting their 2019 guidance because the acquisition of Innogy is set to offset a decline in earnings from the disposal of its renewables business and lingering problems with their UK operations.
Okay, and this E.ON, not to be mistaken, is to partner with Ocado on online shopping.
That's right. Yes, another exciting deal right there. I don't see Ocado having opened just yet, but traders were forecasting a gain on this deal. Ocado is going to build robot warehouses similar to the ones they have in the UK in Japan with the retailer E.ON. And this is said to be one of the biggest overseas deals yet for Ocado. Quite exciting.
Okay, and Lufthansa CEO meeting Thursday with the Italian minister. This is all about Alitalia.
Another piece of good news. So Lufthansa is up 1.3% on that. Messaggero is reporting that the Lufthansa CEO, Carsten Spohr, met on Thursday with Italy's economic development minister, Patuanelli, to discuss the deal on Alitalia, which is obviously a struggling carrier. And Lufthansa promised to keep the dialogue open on the possible rescue of Alitalia. Again, the CEO reiterated Lufthansa's position that it does not want to inject equity immediately, but is open to a commercial partnership to help the restructuring.
Okay, so perhaps more consolidation in the airline industry in Europe. Thank you so much, Bloomberg stocks reporter Ksenia Gluchko.
Let's continue with our top stories. And Bloomberg sources say Morgan Stanley has fired or placed on leave at least 4 traders after they allegedly concealed hundreds of millions of dollars in losses on trades linked to emerging markets. More from Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
Sources say Morgan Stanley is investigating whether the 4 mismarked securities to conceal as much as $140 million in losses. The traders include Scott Eisner and Rodrigo Yola in London and Thiago Melzer and Mitchell Noddle in New York, according to the sources. Melzer, responsible for Forex and EM Americas trading, Noddle involved in macro trading in the Americas, including rates and currencies. Eisner's LinkedIn says he managed orders for Central and Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. No comment from any of them. One source tells us Morgan Morgan Stanley's currency options desk has struggled this year because of a lack of volatility, and a source says the company apparently already booked some of the losses last quarter. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
Now, meanwhile, in politics, the NHS will not be part of any trade deal with the United States. That's according to the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He told broadcaster ITN that he'd rather walk away from a post-Brexit agreement with Washington.
We say goodbye.
Really?
We say see you later. Yes.
You'd walk away from trade talks?
Literally, that would be it.
So it comes as the opposition Labour Party has alleged that the Conservatives are in secret talks with the US discussing access for US companies to the National Health Service. Of course, Mr. Trump arrives in the UK on Monday, so that could be a real wild card. And do be sure to tune in later today, 12 p.m. noon, because Bloomberg Westminster will bring you all your UK politics news, and we're going to be speaking to Delta Poll's Joe Twyman. So that's on London DAB Digital Radio, or catch the podcast later on Apple Music or your preferred radio app.
Yeah, it's interesting. If we look at the pound today, we're actually flat, and we did kind of give up the gains yesterday as well after we had a little bit of a gain, Caroline, following that YouGov MRP poll, 129.10. It seems like we're going to have to get some more significant polls out to push above 130 on cable.
Yeah, and we've only got a couple of weeks till the actual result as well. So, yeah, very interesting. Let's take you to the next story about China. Latest big bank listing is drawing the lowest retail demand in almost half a decade. It's the nation's biggest stock listing since 2010, but it is highlighting concerns over trouble in China's banking system and a lack of exuberance in its stock market. China is hoping to raise over $4.5 billion from the listing of Postal Savings Bank.
Interesting as well, because there's a story on the Bloomberg today about the financial warning signs flashing almost everywhere in China. Of course, we did have authorities already warn about financial stability earlier this week, but this story talks about defaults and weak banks threatening growth and financial stability, and officials being reluctant to step in, wary of the moral hazard. Now, let's stick with Asia, and Japan may re-embrace the power of public spending with one of the biggest stimulus packages of the Abe era. Slowing global growth, the highest sales tax, and a string of natural disasters have given the government reason to shift toward a mix of fiscal measures and ultra-loose monetary policy. That would be welcome news for the Bank of Japan, which has appeared reluctant to ramp up its own long-running stimulus program.
Fiscal space for the Japanese government is somewhat limited, so that so-called wise spending is I think, required.
That was BOJ Governor Haruhiko Kuroda.
Meanwhile, the Bank of Korea left its key rate unchanged amid an economy increasingly undermined by weak global demand. Governor Lee says that the decision was not unanimous, with one member calling for a cut. Industrial production in South Korea slumped in October, slowing much faster than economists were expecting. Factory output was down 2.5% on last year, in line with predictions.
And the bad news is getting worse for India's economy. Bloomberg's Vrishti Beniwal says Prime Minister Modi is exhausting all options to stem the fallout.
Data on Friday will likely show the economy had its weakest performance last quarter in more than 6 years, with the growth rate dropping below 5% mark. Having left much of the stimulus burden to the central bank, Modi is now taking bolder steps to reverse the decline. In recent months, the government has slashed corporate taxes and merged banks. While authorities are committed to doing more, the policy room may be limited. In New Delhi, Vrishti Beniwal, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
So those are our top stories. Let's get the latest in global news with Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Donald Trump has made a surprise visit to Afghanistan for Thanksgiving. The president had a meeting with both the country's president and US troops. Trump saying peace talks with the Taliban have resumed. That's amid a push for a ceasefire to reduce US deployment in the region.
The Taliban wants to make a deal. We'll see if they want to make a deal. It's got to be a real deal, but we'll see. But they want to make a deal. And they only want to make a deal because you're doing a great job. That's the only reason they want to make a deal.
Here in the UK, the Conservative Party has complained to the media regulator after Channel 4 News refused to let Michael Gove stand in for Boris Johnson in a climate change debate that happened last night. That's after the broadcaster used a melting ice sculpture to replace the Prime Minister. The news programme had asked the leaders of the key political parties to take part in the debate ahead of next month's election. However, Johnson and Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage chose not to attend. Crossing over to Germany, just a week after Angela Merkel's own party survived a leadership battle. It's now her allied Social Democrats that threaten to blow up the governing coalition with the election of a new leader. Bloomberg's Birgit Jennen reports.
In a vote that could decide the future of Germany's ruling coalition, Finance Minister Olaf Scholz will find out on Saturday if members of his Social Democratic Party have elected him co-leader. Scholz's main challenger, Norbert Walter Borjans, has hinted he may pull the SPD out of Angela Merkel's government, triggering fresh political turbulence in Europe's biggest economy. In Berlin, Birgit Jen and Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And police have lifted their blockade on Hong Kong Polytechnic University. That's after officers cleared a campus that's been besieged for nearly 2 weeks amid a violent standoff with protesters. Officers said they found thousands of petrol bombs and items including bottles of corrosive chemicals, bows, arrows and damaged vehicles. It ends a standoff that transfixed the city. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. Now with the morning sport, here's George Alderman.
The pressures increased on Arsenal boss Unai Emery following a 2-1 defeat to Eintracht Frankfurt in the Europa League. His side missed the chance to qualify from their group with a game to spare and have now gone 7 matches without a win in all competitions. Celtic, who were already through, eased to a 3-1 win over Rennes at Parkhead. Wolves drew 3-3 away at Braga to qualify for the last 32. Rangers 2-2 draw with Feyenoord in the Netherlands moved them a step closer to the next stage. Manchester United lost 2-1 to Astana in Kazakhstan, but had already made it out of their group. Saracens have their returning England World Cup stars back for this evening's clash with Bath in Rugby Union's Premiership. Owen Farrell, Maro Itoje and Billy Vunipola will feature for the Top Flight's Boston team for the first time this season. Saris are currently on minus 22 points following their punishment for breaching the salary cap. Edinburgh can move level on points with Conference B leaders Munster in the Pro 14 tonight. They do that with a bonus point win away at the Pacesetters. And Scarlets, who are in second place, make the trip to Conference A side Ulster.
Now here's a look at what you should be watching today. We mentioned India. Well, that third quarter GDP comes out at noon UK time today. You mentioned US markets closing early. Plus, holiday shopping really kicks off. It's Black Friday, if you've forgotten. And then Germany and lawmakers there are looking to confirm the government's balanced budget today too.
Yeah, e-commerce expected to stay strong with Black Friday. I won't be helping with that. I prefer to physically go to the shops. Watch out for me in Spitalfields later. This is Bloomberg.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's John Farrow.
Brian Gilvary, BP CFO, joins us out of London. Do you see it
It's a trade-off at the moment, Brian, between exploring the higher return projects like oil and potentially sacrificing higher dividends to have a more sustainable future. Is that a trade-off that needs to happen in the coming decade?
I don't think that's a trade-off in the next decade. I think you sort of go out to sort of the period 2030, 2040, 2050. What we need to recognise is today 85% of the world's energy comes from coal, oil and gas. Last year, energy demand increased, primary energy demand increased by 2.9%. That's the highest we've seen in over a decade. We have 2 billion more people arriving on the planet over the next 20 years, and 1 billion more of today's population that will want access to power. That's something like a 40 to 45% increase. So I think oil and gas are going to be a big part of that mix, and I think natural gas forms a really important transitionary fuel, especially if you think 30 years out, I'll say 20 years out, and the introduction of hydrogen in the mix as a potential transitionary fuel for us from natural gas. So, no, I think oil and gas is going to play a big part. The issue for companies like BP is how do we deal with the CO2 that comes with that oil and gas, and how we actually offset that in some way going forward.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker, and it's time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash from the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin with Richard Jones. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Caroline. It's a sea of red across Asian equities again today, with losses being led by the Hang Seng trading down 2%. The Nikkei 225 and Shanghai Composite are both down about 0.5%, with the Kospi down about 1.5%. U.S. equity futures are also trading lower, with the E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures both down by 4 and 0.5 respectively. European equities have also opened up on the back foot this morning, with the Euro Stoxx 50, the DAX, CAC 40 and FTSE 100 all down by about 4 to 0.5%. Looking at the sector breakdown in Europe, losses are being led by basic resources, banks, and autos. Turning to bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is little changed at 1.77%, with the 10-year German bond yield also steady at minus 0.36%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is little changed, with most G10 pairs trading in tight ranges. Another busy day today for data in Europe. October retail sales in Germany were lower than expected. The France inflation and GDP data were broadly in line with consensus expectations. Additional data today include German employment readings, employment, GDP, and inflation data from Italy, UK credit and money supply, and Eurozone inflation. The ECB's Villeroy and Guindos also speak today. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Caroline?
Great, thanks for that roundup, Richard. That was a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more of what's going on around the world.
Caroline, good morning. North Korea may be testing its relationship with President Trump. Kim Jong-un's regime fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles and may be planning even bigger ones. North Korea has threatened to walk away from nuclear talks unless the US offers up concessions, and that's by the end of the year. Italian police have arrested 19 far-right extremists in raids across the country. They uncovered a cache of weapons and a range of Nazi paraphernalia. The suspects were trying to form the Italian National Socialist Workers' Party and were making contacts in southern Europe. And finally, are you planning on hitting the sales later? I know Naira is. Well, Nationwide expects its customers to spend more than £125,000 a minute bagging Black Friday deals. The Building Society thinks around £180 million will be spent at shops and online today. It saw £170 million worth of items bought last year. Global News 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Now, Leanne, although I will be physically going to the shops rather than shopping online, I'm not going to really add to that volume because my shopping method is swift, efficient and concentrated.
Oh, like you all over it. But I do like the fact that Black Friday is firmly on the British calendar. Great stuff. Thanks, Leanne.
All right, let's turn to one of our top stories this morning then. And China's biggest stock listing in almost a decade is receiving a lukewarm reception from retail investors. The deal comes amid a flurry of IPOs that have faded quickly and concerns about China's banking sector. Joining us now from Beijing is Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie for the details. Tom, great to have you with us. So what conclusions can we draw from China's biggest stock listing since 2010, drawing the lowest demand from retail investors in almost half a decade.
Absolutely, Naira. So 79 times oversubscribed, which sounds like a lot, but in the context, China is used to having these IPOs hundreds, sometimes thousands of times oversubscribed. The context, of course, is that there is just a dearth of volatility here, and turnover has slumped. 7 out of the last 36 listings since about the end of October are now trading below IPO price. So broadly, retail investors here are concerned about the economic slowdown. They're concerned about moderately weak corporate earnings, and of course they're concerned about the continuing trade war. And in fact, the last time that we saw subscriptions this week was back in 2015, and about a month after that IPO, the market crashed.
Yeah, so this is the real worry. But then it's not just that, is it? Because we've had weak economic data out of China recently, and a lot of warning signs around consumer indebtedness, around sort of mounting stress in China. So, you know, there's a bigger picture too.
Absolutely. I mean, particularly the banking sector is under pressure here. So we've seen so far this year what have effectively been 3 bailouts of small lenders in China. We've also seen 2 examples of bank runs. Now, these are not in major cities, and these don't involve top-tier banks. There are rural banks which are under pressure, and certainly the regulators here have woken up to this and are trying to address these issues in terms of liquidity for these banks. The other issue facing the financial sector here is that the larger banks, particularly those state-owned lenders, are being pressured to lend to the private sector, the small and medium-sized enterprises that account for so much of the growth and so much of the job growth here, to ensure that they can stabilise or go some way to stabilising the economy. The risk, of course, is that you get potentially exposure to bad debt, and already bad debt levels are starting to tick up here, so that's a concern. And then you've got the rate environment. So the central bank has been gradually easing rates on things like the loan prime rate, which is the benchmark rate here, and that pressures margins for the banks in terms of the net interest margin. So in all these areas, the banking sector, China's lenders, are facing something of a squeeze, which is probably why the retail investor here is not jumping at joy at the prospect of getting their hands on shares for Postal Savings Bank of China.
Tom, is there a sense that Chinese authorities have mismanaged arresting the slowdown with actually maintaining financial stability?
That could be one way of arguing what has happened here. I think most of the economists, the analysts we speak to, so look, they're trying to thread a very fine line here, trying to strike a balance, because of course deleveraging and financial risks has been a priority for policymakers here over the last 2 to 3 years. And it's surprised many that they haven't put that on the back burner to address the slowing growth and acted more aggressively in terms of monetary policy easing and financial easing, fiscal easing as well. But they are very concerned about bubbles in the financial sector. They want to address those and keep those capped, whilst also ensuring, of course, that the bottom doesn't completely fall out of the growth picture. Whether or not they're getting that mix right is up for debate, of course. The data here, and you see that in terms of the industrial profits that we got out this week, is obviously looking pretty grim. We're going to get manufacturing data, PMI data, out on Saturday. That'll give us a clear indication of where the economy is going. But that balancing act is certainly a tough one for China's policymakers.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Bloomberg's Tom Mackenzie live from Beijing about the struggles in China to deal with indebtedness. A fascinating story.
Absolutely. And in terms of the Asian markets, I mean, we did see some weakness across Asia in the Asian session, still continuing to some degree in red, really, across all the indices led by Hong Kong. The Hang Seng down more than 2%. In Europe, we saw declines of 0.1% yesterday, and today the Stoxx 600 extends those declines and builds on them, down 0.4%.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Shoppers are expected to pack the nation's shopping malls this weekend, with a late Thanksgiving holiday making for a somewhat compressed holiday season. And despite their reputation for preferring clicks to bricks, Bloomberg opinion retail reporter Sarah Halzak says younger shoppers will be out as well, most likely in groups.
Deloitte did some survey work around this and asked folks, will you be out shopping with family and friends? Among people who were going to go to stores this weekend, Gen Z was most likely to respond that they were doing it with family and friends.
Total holiday spending is expected to be up about 4% this year. If a trip to the car dealer is on your holiday calendar, expect to be rewarded with generous incentives. J.D. Power says incentive spending will likely top $4,500 per vehicle this month for the first time, and it could go higher into next month. Stocks begin their Black Friday session with the major averages at all-time highs. The NYSE and NASDAQ will close 3 hours early. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's markets. The IBKR Pro account plan offers investors enhanced price execution, our lowest margin loan rates, and highest interest paid on idle cash balances, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, the IBKR Pro account plan offers low-cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR Pro account at ibkr.com.
We just got back from a beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. We dropped off our Christmas shopping at the hotel. Then it was off to be spellbound at the Theatre Royal Bath. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Imagine carving your way through the fresh snow falling right now in the French resort of Val d'Isère. Fly to Geneva and head to the slopes from only $29.99. Book now with EasyJet. One way per person, limited availability. See easyjet.com.
There's a growing threat from Moscow Center, and Britain's intelligence service think they found the man for the job.
The natural-born agent runner is his own man. He may take his orders from London, but in the field, he is the master of his fate and the fate of his agents.
A powerful portrait of our times, told with unflagging tension by one of the greatest novelists of our age, John le Carré's Agent Running in the Field. Available now at Waterstones.
Something explosive is coming to the home of rugby. When Harlequins meet Leicester Tigers, expect fireworks. With tickets from £17 children and £27 adults, Big Game 12 is more than a Gallagher Premiership rugby fixture. It's London's biggest rugby party. Enjoy music, entertainment and a truly incredible atmosphere before the big game kicks off at 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December at Twickenham Stadium. Go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12.
They don't chant your name when you give blood, or sing songs about you. But patients and their families will remember you forever. Because your blood can change their lives. We need more blood donors in Tooting, the West End and Edgware. Bleed for London. Join us today at blood.co.uk.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can feel your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30am in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Caroline Hetke. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
European equities, 30 minutes into the equity market open, down for a second day after closing within 1% of a record earlier this week. The Stock 600 moves lower by 0.4%. Across regional equity benchmarks, FTSE 100 down by the same. The CAC 40 down almost 0.4%. The DAX lower by almost 0.6%. The IBEX and FTSE MIB lower by 3 and 0.4%, respectively. US stock and bond markets closed yesterday for Thanksgiving. Half day of trading today, but futures look to be pointing to another down day. S&P E-minis and Dow futures down 0.3%. Nasdaq futures lower by 0.4%. The 10-year Treasury yield trades steady on a 177 handle, and it's quiet in European bond markets as well. The 10-year Bund yield at -36, going nowhere. The 10-year gilt yield on a 67 handle. Currency volatility staying suppressed. That's causing some concern to some. If we look at the Bloomberg Dollar Index, even though we haven't seen any big outsized moves, 8 straight days of gains is what we've seen before today. Best winning streak since March, and we hit a 6-week high earlier this week. We hold steady today. The South Korean won was weakening earlier. The Bank of Korea held pat on rates but cut its growth outlook, and we are continuing to see some weakness in the won, trading at 11.8146. Taking a look at oil market, so 4 weeks of gains for oil ahead of the OPEC Plus meeting last week, but we hold steady right now. Bear in mind that volumes are lower in WTI trading again because of the shorter trading day in the US. WTI flat at 58.08. Brent crude trades at 63.71, down 0.25 percentage point.
Just some breaking news on the Bloomberg terminal. A line from Sweden. GDP rises 0.3% in the quarter, up 1.6% in the year. So that's Sweden's third quarter GDP. Perhaps gives a clearer path for the Riksbank to a December rate increase. So that breaking on the Bloomberg terminal. Let's also take you to our top stories this morning. Morgan Stanley has fired or placed on leave at least 4 traders over alleged mismarking of securities that concealed losses of as much as $140 million. Now, we're told that the bank has opened an investigation into the issue, which is linked to emerging market currencies and involves traders both in London and New York. Mismarking, of course, means that the value placed on securities doesn't reflect their actual worth.
And turning to the UK and politics, and the NHS will not be part of any trade deal with the US. That's according to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He told broadcaster ITN that he'd rather walk away from a post-Brexit agreement with Washington.
We say goodbye.
Really?
We say see you later. Yes.
You'd walk away from trade talks?
Literally, that would be it.
This comes as the opposition Labour Party alleges the Conservatives are in secret talks with the US discussing access for US companies to the National Health Service.
And India is braced for a growth shock when quarterly GDP data comes out later today. India's economy is expected to have grown at its weakest in more than 6 years, with the third quarter growth rate falling below the psychologically important 5% level. So that we're expecting at 12 noon today.
For more on the story, let's go live to Mumbai, where Bloomberg Economics India economist Abhishek Gupta is standing by. Abhishek, great to catch up with you again. So talk us through Bloomberg Economics expectations, because you're a little bit more positive than consensus.
Yes, that's correct. I'm in fact expecting the GDP growth data for the July to September quarter to come in at a flat 5%, and this is a bit optimistic relative to a consensus projection of a further slowdown to a 4.5%. The reason is primarily that public spending in India has seen a sharp jump by both central and state governments during the quarter, and this has in part been driven by a bumper transfer of surplus dividends from the RBI to the central government. But besides that, I think the consensus is right in believing that the Indian economy is going through one of its severest downturns since the financial crisis. And if you look at other areas of the economy, high-frequency data does show a very negative picture, be it auto sales, electricity production, credit growth slowdown, capital expenditure, exports, industrial production. The data is showing a further slowdown.
Abhishek, we talk a lot about China, a lot less, it would seem, I think, about India. The government's obviously attempted a lot of structural reforms in India, some with greater success than others. So why do you think actually a recovery has been so very difficult?
That's an excellent point. And in fact, I would have expected that government structural reforms should have started to bear fruit by now. But essentially what happened in India was that all along when the government was taking these structural reforms and doing its part on the fiscal side, the monetary policy has not been supportive of growth until last year. So last year, the RBI created a liquidity squeeze in the economy and delivered 2 rate hikes at a time when the economy actually needed further policy support. And that has dealt a big financial blow to the economic system. And it takes time to recover from such an financial shock. RBI's easy policies this year have reversed that tightness. And my sense is that the GDP print for the July to September quarter is likely to mark the lowest point on the GDP trajectory. And going ahead, we are likely to see some recovery. In the December quarter, there's going to be a favorable base effect, but in the March quarter, we'll actually see a genuine recovery going ahead.
So Abhishek, what is the policy mix that you expect from here to actually lead to that recovery in terms of what we get from the government versus how much more easing we get from the RBI?
With regards to the RBI had projected a 5.3% growth along with an accommodative stance. So if growth is around 5%, where I expect you can expect a 25 basis points rate cut, but if growth further disappoints below where the consensus expects it, you could expect a bigger rate cut by the RBI. And I think given where inflation is, RBI has space for another rate cut in February, but beyond that there'll be a long pause. As far as the government is concerned, the government already delivered a big fiscal boost to the economy when it announced corporate tax cuts earlier in the year. And I think the government does not really have further space to increase the fiscal deficit from here on. But it can, and I think it is likely to take more sector-specific measures to prop up growth.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Bloomberg's economics India economist Abhishek Gupta there live from India.
So we look ahead to that data from India later today, but we also look ahead to euro area inflation, which is due at 10 a.m. UK time and probably accelerated in November. But as Bloomberg's Piotr Skolimowski explains, it's not enough for the ECB.
Economists predict consumer prices rose 0.9% from a year earlier, remaining below the ECB's target of just under 2% for a year. Officials doubled down on their stimulus in September, yet their ultra-loose policy is attracting scrutiny over potential negative side effects. The ECB looks poised to take stock of its strategy and inflation target during policy review early next year. In Frankfurt, Piotr Skolimowski, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, let's get the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Caroline. President Trump has made a surprise trip to Afghanistan to celebrate Thanksgiving with U.S. troops. He met the country's president and said peace talks have resumed with the Taliban and that he wants to persuade the militants to agree a ceasefire. The president also confirmed he wants to reduce troop levels to around 8,500 from the current 12,000 and may go even further. Here in the UK, the Conservative Party is accusing Channel 4 News of breaking impartiality rules. That's after the broadcaster used an ice sculpture to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He failed to attend a live climate change debate. That was last night. The programme featured leaders from other parties, but Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage chose not to attend. Police have lifted their blockade on a Hong Kong Polytechnic University. That's after officers cleared a campus that's been besieged for nearly 2 weeks amid a violent standoff with protesters. Bloomberg's Karen Lee reports.
Officers said they found thousands of petrol bombs at PolyU and items including bottles of corrosive chemical, bows, arrows, and damaged vehicles. It ends a standoff that transfixed the city as recent chaos brought unprecedented battles to the city's universities. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Louis Lacaille Zhao of the centre-right National Party has won Uruguay's presidency after his rival conceded 4 days after a runoff election. Bloomberg's Ken Parks has the story.
His victory ends 15 years of rule by the left-wing Broad Front.
Martinez had refused to concede until the election regulator finished its final tally. But more than halfway through the count, it became clear that Lakajipo had received enough votes to win. Lakajipo will inherit a country with enviable measures of poverty and wealth distribution, but he faces the challenge of reviving growth and cutting an unsustainable government deficit. Montevideo, Ken Parks, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jan Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Thanos Papasava, CIO at ABP Invest, joins us in the studio next. This is where 40 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe, and we look at a second day of declines for the Stock 600. We're lower by 0.3%. It is month end, and we are heading nonetheless for a third month of gains for global equities. Quite a lot of positivity priced in around US-China trade talks. What does our guest think of that? This is Bloomberg.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Today, nearly all business is international business. The same goes for business disputes. That's why the International Center for Dispute Resolution provides a faster, more efficient approach to dispute resolution across borders. Backed by the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org. Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Imagine carving your way through the fresh snow falling right now in the French resort of Val d'Isère. Fly to Geneva and head to the slopes from only $29.99. Book now with EasyJet. One way per person, limited availability. See easyjet.com.
When Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers, it's always a big game. But this year, it's the big game. Hosted at Twickenham, you can expect fireworks on the field and off it. Pre-kick-off, enjoy music, entertainment and a truly incredible atmosphere. Then watch two Gallagher Premiership rugby giants go head-to-head. Tickets from just £17 children, £27 adults. Go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Next. Nah. Nope. Boring. If you skip through loads of your TV channels, why are you paying loads of money for them? With TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre, you can access the nation's favourite TV shows, a world of films and sport, live and on demand, all for £25.95 a month for 18 months. And if you're quick, you'll even get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk. For everyone. Offer ends 5th of December, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
So do you really think your party's manifesto is plausible, or is it just an election bribe?
Get an in-depth look at all the main party manifestos. From public services to immigration, the Times and the Sunday Times will guide you through. Pick up your copy today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition.
For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked breads to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
Christmas isn't just about the turkey, you know. At Asda, we've a whole range of delicious joints to bring the family together, like our Butcher's Selection pork loin at just £3.97 per kilo, and our Butcher's Selection beef joint at £4.97 per kilo. So, who's on carving duty? Asda, let's make Christmas extra special. Selected stores subject to availability.
So, on Monday I left work at 5:36 instead of 5:30. Wednesday was 5:41. Yesterday I made the whole team a cup of tea. And today I lent someone my stapler. Do I deserve this? Yes, I think I do.
Go on. Treat yourself to an O2 Black Friday deal. We've slashed our prices by up to £300 on selected handsets. You know you deserve it. Search O2 Black Friday.
It's 4th of December 2019. O2 Refresh Credit by Telefonica UK Limited. Eligibility and terms apply.
At TUI, we can help you find the perfect getaway for two. We fly to over 70 destinations worldwide, so wherever you have in mind, we'll help you get there. This Black Friday, you can save up to £150 per booking, and you'll automatically get the chance to win the cost of your holiday back. Book online or in store with one of our travel experts. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Offer available on selected holidays for a limited time and subject to availability. Booking T's and C's apply. At All Protected.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European shares sliding. We're down 0.3% on the US stock 600 just 50 minutes into European trading. We're following the losses that we had in the Asian session. So in Hong Kong, the sell-off particularly severe. The Hang Seng closed down 0.2%. The CSI 300 also closed down almost 0.9%. When it comes to the rest of the markets right now in Europe, FTSE 100 down 0.3%. Xetra DAX drops 0.5%. The big gainer, though, is Ocado. It is expanding into Asia with Aeon. It's building robot warehouses in Japan. So that's the top gainer right now on the US stocks 600. As for the rest of the markets, looking ahead to the US market open after Thanksgiving, of course, we have a half day of trading in Europe today. In terms of futures, we're down for all the major indices at least 0.25 percentage point. And in the fixed income markets, we trade at 1.76%, so just slightly lower. European benchmarks are also slightly weaker in terms of yields, negative 36 basis points for German Bund yields. As for the FX space, the dollar's been on a reasonable winning streak for 8 days in a row, but we reversed that today. Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index just slightly softer. Here, 2 weeks ahead of the UK general election, the pound trades at 1.2905, so also a fraction weaker. The offshore one at 7.02, and the euro trades flat at 1.10. So that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Israel is asking investors to treat it like a European market. 6 years ago, MSCI rejected the nation's bid to join its Europe index, but now it's trying again. It's reaching out to understand what needs to be done to remove any obstacles. Israel says its economy resembles Europe more than the Middle East. Now to Iraq, where nearly 40 people have been killed in one of the bloodiest days since anti-government protests begun, according to medics and officials. At least 25 people died when security forces opened fire to clear bridges in a southern city. Another 4 protesters died in Baghdad and 10 more in the city of Najaf. Iraqis are demanding more jobs and an end to corruption and better public services. And finally, the world of social media can breathe a sigh of relief. Facebook and Instagram are back up and running again. Facebook says it has resolved an issue with its central software system. The bug prevented users from accessing its family of apps. That was yesterday. Facebook owns Instagram. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Not being on Facebook or Instagram, Leanne, this totally passed me by.
Well, you know what happened to me? It stopped my stalking yesterday afternoon. I couldn't stalk anyone, and it was really frustrating.
So you're doing the stalking, not
the social media stalk. You couldn't refresh anyone's pages. But anyway,
good stuff.
I can stalk all afternoon today now.
No, you've got to get down the shops for Black Friday.
Oh yeah, of course. Got to go sale shopping first before my stalking.
Let's get to our guest for the rest of this hour. Thanos Papasavvas, founder and CIO at ABP Invest, joining us now in the London studio. Welcome, Thanos. Hope you weren't too derailed by what's happened with Facebook and Instagram.
Likewise with you. It sort of passed me by. I wasn't aware of it.
Yes. What I'm sure has not passed you by is we're on a third month of gains for global equities. We're seeing a little bit of risk off today. Of course, it is month end, so maybe we don't want to read too much of it, too much into it. We'll have lighter volumes in the US with a half day of trading there. A lot of people say to me there's a lot of optimism priced into equity markets around US-China trade. So what do we need to see from phase one for equity markets to move higher? Will just a very skeletal phase one deal with no prospect of phase two and no rollback of tariffs lead to new highs?
I believe that although there is some optimism, which is good because this has shifted over the last month, we started becoming more optimistic August and September. The markets have shifted more positive over the last month. However, although the optimism has been shifting positively, markets and cash is still very much on the sidelines. There's a lot of cash and availability to invest, be it on the public markets, but also in the private markets. So converting the optimism to actual movement in action and investments is still one step. The second is the impact this will have on the underlying economics. So we expect an improvement in the underlying economics, which will then lead to the second phase of more positive underlying equity markets in 2020.
Okay, so you've also talked about the manufacturing data and surveys offering too much gloom. I mean, this in a week when we were passing the data out of China and, really significantly concerned about China and its impact on the world economy.
And very much so, especially over the last couple of months where we had the PMI surveys, manufacturing surveys, all making new lows, a shift between manufacturing, if you like, and consumer, but still manufacturing, a lot of doom and gloom. But the reason for that is if we look back the last 3 months or 4 months, there has been this sort of ongoing concern. And our view was that there will be a resolution because both President Trump wants to ensure that the U.S. economy does well for 2020 for him to secure a second term in office. And the Chinese also want a compromise, given also the recent social upheaval in Hong Kong. So with that in view, we expected the broader sentiment to improve following some type of a resolution. So sentiment surveys and data are backward-looking rather than forward-looking in the way we're looking at this.
Thanos, if you look at the S&P 500 versus the Shanghai Composite, the S&P 500 at the most expensive on record versus the Shanghai Composite now. Meanwhile, the correlation between US and Chinese equities has been declining since August. So I was asking my guests on TV earlier, is that divergence going to continue? Will investors still see the US as a more defensive market and stay in it, even if we do see a positive outcome from US-China talks? You turned positive on China stocks last November 2018. You say you're holding on to that view. Is that based on valuation? Because a lot of people say to me that actually the US is going to continue to outperform regardless of what happens.
It is both. It's a change in the trajectory which we expect, and as the resolution starts to take place, we believe that China, but also very importantly Germany, is going to be outperforming. So Germany being the most open economy out there is going to be benefiting both on an absolute but also relative versus the CAC 40. So our preference still is very much in play for China, but also for Germany.
So then would you consider rebalancing equity exposure actually away from US and China towards Europe? I mean, it's a very unloved market. Yes, this year the index has gone up by 21% and we're heading for the best year in 10 years. But, investors have continually shied away from a market we know has such a weak economic backdrop.
And I agree with you. This is going to take time. I think that the reason why positive for Germany is not only on the back of the trade tensions easing, which is one of the factors. The other factor is very much a domestic-driven factor. We expect the change which is now taking place domestically with SPD, Olaf Scholz taking on most likely in our view, and he, I think, will be looking to push towards more easier fiscal policies. You can't throw money to the Germans because they're not going to spend it, so there's no point in easing taxes. The savings will continue. So it's a matter of projects. It's whether it's a green project, infrastructure project, significant issues which can be dealt with. So it's a two-pronged approach in terms of Germany. Overall tensions, but also domestic politics helping.
So you're fairly bullish, Thanos, because you do expect that easing in US-China tensions to go into 2020. How much do you expect easier policy from central banks, but also potentially a fiscal boost to add to your outlook?
You've touched a very, very sore point of mine, which is the central banks, and I'm thinking Fed. And the reason I say that is because I've totally got the Fed wrong this year. I did not expect that the Fed should cut rates. It cut rates obviously 3 times. My view was that the Fed should not be there to sort of take out Trump's fires, dealing with trade tensions. The underlying economic rationale was not there for rate cuts. The unemployment was still very high. There were no signs of declines in inflation. But I think that the Fed could be behind the curve in 2020. Mm-hmm. So linking into this sort of easier tensions between US-China, I think the Fed will find out that manufacturing, consumer sentiment is continuing to do well, unemployment all-time lows, inflation may start to come through, and, very importantly, in an election year, it'll be very difficult for Powell to raise rates. So I think the Fed could be behind the curve.
But hang on, what leads you to think that inflation may pick up? I mean, this is the conundrum. This is what every central bank is kind of racking its brains about. And you mentioned in your note that actually possibly even looking to a rate rise from the Fed.
Yes, I think and I need to be clear about that. It's not that inflation is suddenly going to create a problem. We're going to see rising inflation. It's that there's going to be a shift in the inflationary expectations. So the market will readjust its expectations towards a gradual pickup in inflation. And because the Fed will not be able to act next year, it could be perceived to be behind the curve. And as a result, yields start to rise and the curve steepens. So I think that, thank you for that. It's very, very important clarification.
So the curve will steepen. What will it do to other markets like the dollar, for example?
So we've been positive the dollar for the last year and a half. We maintain that positive view on the dollar versus the euro and versus the yen because of economic growth differentials and interest rate differentials. So the Fed, as per my view, is likely to shift to sort of a more hawkish tone or sentiment, whereas the ECB still has a lot of work to do. So positive dollar, but broadly this improvement in sentiment should be positive for emerging markets and global equities.
Thanos Papasavvas, founder and CIO at ABP Invest. Great to have you with us in the London studio, and I'll continue the conversation with you on TV on surveillance in just a moment.
Yeah, sounds great. TV Go on your terminal. Just break the red headline on the Bloomberg terminal right now. German unemployment falls 16,000 in November versus an estimated 6,000 gain. So a red head on the terminal. This is Bloomberg.
As Ben Frank, we just got back from a beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Next, we donned our skates for Bath on Ice. I'm a natural. Didn't have to hold on to anything. Or anyone. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
When Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers, it's always a big game. But this year, it's the big game. Hosted at Twickenham, you can expect fireworks on the field and off it. Pre-kick-off, enjoy music, entertainment and a truly incredible atmosphere. Then watch two Gallagher Premiership rugby giants go head-to-head. Tickets from just £17 children, £27 adults. Go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We can't in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
The financial capital of the world. 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern. The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else. I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. Matt Miller is out this week, so it falls to me to do the data check. So let's do that right now. We check the data for you every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio. And we get to the equity markets where we're seeing a bit of a retreat for equities, but perhaps off session lows. So the Stock 600 down by around 0.2%. The same for the FTSE 100 down around 0.2. The CAC 40 actually fairly flat this morning. The Xetra DAX in Germany down by 0.25%. US futures had looked worse than they do at this moment. So perhaps that explains a little bit of why we're seeing a pullback from earlier losses on European equities. So US futures point downwards by between 2 and 0.3%. The handover from Asia was decidedly weak. The MSCI Asia Pacific down by 0.9%, and in particular weakness coming through on the Hong Kong market. The Hang Seng down by more than 2%. Some specifics around healthcare doing the rounds in terms of what the driver was there for the Hong Kong market, but more broadly just concerns around a lack of progress on trade and what the tensions in Hong Kong and the protests there, how that plays into the trade story between the US and China. So looking at oil prices, we're down by around 0.25% on the WTI price at 57.97, down 0.7% on Brent at 63.42. The US 10-year yield 1.76%. So we're not seeing all that much movement on the US 10-year. Of course, we didn't see any trading on US treasuries or on stock markets yesterday for Thanksgiving. Today we see a shortened trading day for both. So we'll keep an eye on movement there, but volumes expected to be low. They usually are at this time of year. In terms of FX markets, then no big moves. The dollar is fairly stable. The euro dollar 110 withstands the mixed bag of data we've had on the German economy, weak inflation print, but better than expected jobs picture. The pound is fairly flat as well, 129.09 as we head towards the weekend. So that's a quick look at what's happening on these European equity markets at this point. Let's get to the major themes in investments at the moment. Stocks sliding a little bit on the last day of November as investors continue to wait for progress on the US-China trade talks. For more, let's bring in Janet Mewey, global economist at Cazenove Capital. Janet, good morning to you. Let me ask you about what your expectation is for trade. It seems we've rallied a long way on European stocks and global stocks on expectations of a trade deal, and thanks to generous central banking balance sheets. What's at risk then if we don't see a phase one deal soon?
So what we think is the markets are already pricing in a phase one deal, as markets are at record high, and there's not a lot of significant news elsewhere. So I think it's really down to the phase one trade deal. So if that doesn't get signed, so I think markets will be left quite disappointed. So I think if the phase one deal is not signed, then probably the next tranche of tariff on December 15th may go ahead, and that is directly affecting the US consumers, and I think that will be viewed by markets as quite negatively. So I'll be very concerned because the US consumers are the relatively resilient part of the economy right now. If they get hit by these tariffs more directly, that could, derail the stabilization we're seeing now.
Yes, it's interesting because you point to recent US housing data as being quite a bright spot and suggest that that's
more broadly supportive of the US consumer, but it wouldn't be supportive of their holiday spending to see further tariffs on consumer products, crucially, coming through on December 15th, would it?
Yeah, I think, of course, the tariffs will impact directly. And I also think it will be a channel to hit the confidence, because right now consumer confidence are holding up really well. But, I think if the tariff goes ahead, then they will be really uncertain. I mean, what about in the future? Could there be more tariff? Because this US-China trade tension is really lingering on for so long, and they're now feeling it directly. So what I worry is, the uncertainty impact on consumers, on businesses, impacting profit margin and leading to, a weakening in the employment. I would be worried about that if there's no phase one deal.
And where do you go to look for equity exposure? Make your own assumptions around whether we get that phase one deal, and then where do you go in 2020? Do you stick with the US and the strong performance we've seen there, or do you go to some of the underperformers of 2019 and look for catch up in those equities?
Yeah, so I'm worried about the phase one trade deal, but our base case is still they will sign it because we think that they have both economic pressure to do that. So our base case is, they signed the deal, so that would help with the market sentiment, and that's why we think we would like the more cyclically exposed areas such as, Europe, Asia. So we still like the US, but we won't be adding more risk to that because we think the valuation is relatively more expensive. So we'll be going for areas that is less, overvalued and that is more exposed to this positive news in trade.
We're looking ahead to the UK election, of course, in matters more domestic and closer to home. Big Brexit implications, obviously, from what happens on December the 12th. Where do we stand on the UK growth story? I know that you have some fairly relatively low expectations for where UK growth goes. What's the driver there?
Yeah, so our growth expectation for next year is 0.8%, which is below consensus of about 1.1%. And our rationale is really because of the momentum of the data going into 2020. What we're tracking is really a slowdown in the UK economy. The latest set of PMIs is very disappointing, all contracting across the sectors. And the leading indicators suggest to us that that momentum would continue to weaken. We had the consumer confidence today, which shows we're at the lowest since the financial crisis. So we do see, we don't see any reason why consumers will be, spending a lot more in times of uncertainty. And, although a lot of people are saying that, a hard Brexit risk is being lifted, we think that businesses, they won't just spend a lot despite these removal of uncertainty. Because after all, we're entering a transition period, assuming that, the Conservatives takes the majority, as the poll suggests, and we leave on January 31st. But we still have a period of prolonged uncertainty with regards to the future relationship with the EU. So I think businesses will just, hold back until there's more clarity.
Yeah, one uncertainty just perhaps being replaced by another uncertainty at the end of December 2020, and the possibility of a cliff edge there. We talk a lot, you mentioned there the general picture around Europe. We've had German unemployment numbers just dropped in the last few minutes, suggesting a little bit more resilient picture for some of the German data. And that's been interesting, hasn't it, over the last few weeks, to witness this bottoming out in the German economic story, because that maybe removes one of the arguments for doing more fiscal stimulus, which a few months ago was being talked about as more likely in Germany. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 2019, a lot of people were worried about a recession in Germany, and that didn't materialize. And I think the data suggests that we won't be seeing a recession in 2020 because the worst is in 2019. And even as it's worst, and when trade tensions are high, Germany was still sticking to its balanced budget, which is the black zero. So we really don't see how the German government would change its stance when actually growth is starting to stabilize or pick up. So we don't really see Germany doing more fiscal stimulus despite more calls from, say, the ECB.
And do you invest in France versus Germany, or do you not like that strategy?
So So I think, right now, if you look at economy-wise, France is doing better than Germany. I think that's really because France has done some fiscal stimulus at the beginning of the year because Macron has responded to the Yellow Vest protesters' demand, and that has really helped. And also, France is less exposed to the trade tension, and I think the industrial sector has benefited from the incidents that happened with Boeing in the US. So the Airbus is actually having more orders, so that really helped. But looking ahead, we think that Germany is the worst is over, as we said. So we will look to a relative actually outperformance in Germany versus France in 2020.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us, Janet. Janet Murray, global economist at Cazenove Capital. I should have just pointed out we've got Italian unemployment data at the top of the hour as well. Showed a drop in the unemployment rate to 9.7%, which was good news, but youth unemployment still at 27.8%. Perhaps that's really where the stimulus conversation lies in Europe. Thanks to Janet for joining us with a view of the markets. Let's get up to date with global news flow. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Anna, good morning. Donald Trump has made a surprise visit to Afghanistan for Thanksgiving. The president had a meeting with both the country's president and U.S. troops. Trump saying peace talks with the Taliban have resumed. That's amid a push for a ceasefire to reduce U.S. deployment in the region.
The Taliban wants to make a deal. We'll see if they want to make a deal. It's got to be a real deal, but we'll see. But they want to make a deal. And they only want to make a deal because you're doing a great job. That's the only reason they want to make a deal.
Here in the UK, the Conservative Party has complained to the media regulator after Channel 4 News refused to let Michael Gove stand in for Boris Johnson in a climate change debate that happened last night. That's after the broadcaster used a melting ice sculpture to replace the Prime Minister. The news programme had asked the leaders of the key political parties to take part in the debate ahead of next month's election. However, Johnson and Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage chose not to attend. Crossing over to Germany, just a week after Angela Merkel's own party survived a leadership battle. It's now her allied Social Democrats that threaten to blow up the governing coalition with the election of a new leader. Bloomberg's Birgit Jennen reports.
In a vote that could decide the future of Germany's ruling coalition, Finance Minister Olaf Scholz will find out on Saturday if members of his Social Democratic Party have elected him co-leader. Scholz's main challenger, Norbert Walter Borjans, has hinted he may pull the SPD out of Angela Merkel's government, triggering fresh political turbulence in Europe's biggest economy. In Berlin, Birgit Jennen, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And police have lifted their blockade on Hong Kong Polytechnic University. That's after officers cleared a campus that's been besieged for nearly 2 weeks amid a violent standoff with protesters. Officers said they found thousands of petrol bombs and items including bottles of corrosive chemicals, bows, arrows and damaged vehicles. It ends a standoff that transfixed the city. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much for that, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
The pressure's increased on Arsenal boss Unai Emery following a 2-1 defeat to Eintracht Frankfurt in the Europa League. His side missed the chance to qualify from their group with a game to spare and have now gone 7 matches without a win in all competitions. Celtic, who were already through, eased to a 3-1 win over Rennes at Parkhead. Wolves drew 3-3 away at Braga to qualify for the last 32. Rangers 2-2 draw with Feyenoord in the Netherlands moved them a step closer to the next stage. Manchester United lost 2-1 to Astana in Kazakhstan, but had already made it out of their group. Saracens have their returning England World Cup stars back for this evening's clash with Bath in Rugby Union's Premiership. Owen Farrell, Maro Itoje and Billy Vunipola will feature for the top flight's bottom team for the first time this season. Saris are currently on minus 22 points following their punishment for breaching the salary cap. Edinburgh can move level on points with Conference B leaders Munster in the Pro 14 tonight. They do that with a bonus point win away at the Pace Setters. And Scarlets, who are in second place, make the trip to Conference A side Ulster.
Thanks very much for that, George. Now for a roundup of the latest US sports, here's Pete Fox.
A feast of football for your Thanksgiving in Atlanta. The Saints, some revenge on the Falcons, 26-18 as New Orleans becomes the first team this season to punch their ticket to the postseason. 2 touchdowns for Taysom Hill in the win, 1 in the air and 1 on the ground. In Dallas, it was all Bills In spite of big numbers from Dak Prescott, 355 and 2 touchdowns, Buffalo cruises a dominant defensive performance in their 9th win of the season, 26-15. And the early action in Detroit got the day started with the Bears coming from behind to beat the Lions in the final seconds of the game. 24-20 as Chicago levels their record at 6-6. Mitchell Trubisky, 29 of 38 for 338 and 3 touchdowns. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC Sports Update.
Plenty of sport and shopping then on this Black Friday. We'll get a retail update next. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Predicting the weather is always a challenge, no matter where you are in the world. To get ahead, one company is turning to supercomputers. I spoke to the CEO of The Weather Company. It's a subsidiary of IBM. Cameron Clayton told me that the new tech will give faster, more precise forecasts, and for the first time, it will cover the entire planet.
We've just launched IBM Graph, which is a global high-resolution weather model, the first of its kind in the world. And we built it because we've sort of seen this meteorological divide. The rest of the world doesn't have the same quality weather forecasting we enjoy here in the United States. And so at IBM and the Weather Company, we've been working for the last 2.5 years to build this new global weather model.
What are you hoping to achieve with it? Are you really looking at forecasting to help save lives? I mean, what really is the end goal?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you know, we do come back to saving lives, and that's sort of the mission our team has. But when we look at weather and the volatility of weather increasing around the world, we also see that it's disproportionately impacting the poorer countries and the poorer people in the world versus the richer nations.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European shares saw significant declines at the start of trading, but seem to have recovered some of their losses. Euro Stoxx 600 just in the red at the moment. The FTSE 100 actually in positive territory. The Xetra DAX down 0.1%. Bonds are actually drifting too this morning, 1.76%, so down barely a basis point for US yields as America comes back from the Thanksgiving holiday today, although it's half day for March. markets there. Negative 36 basis points for German benchmark Bund yields. As for the rest of the equity picture, it was really very much focused on Hong Kong this morning, which saw significant declines. The Hang Seng closed down by 2%, and the MSCI Hong Kong index also dropped by 1.5%. I guess some of it was around the negativity. No more news on the US-China trade deal, but threats yesterday from China around retaliation for President Trump's support of Hong Kong protesters. As for the FX space this morning, Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is slightly weaker this morning, having had an 8-day rally. The pound down 0.1%, 1.29 against the dollar. That's just a couple of weeks ahead of the UK general election. Of course, the euro is at 1.10 this morning. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. North Korea may be testing its relationship with President Trump. Kim Jong-un's regime fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles and may be planning bigger moves. North Korea has threatened to walk away from nuclear talks unless the US offers up concessions, and that's by the end of the year. Italian police have arrested 19 far-right extremists in raids across the country. They uncovered a cache of weapons and a range of Nazi paraphernalia. The suspects were trying to form the Italian National Socialist Workers' Party and were making contacts in southern Europe. And are you planning on hitting the sales later? While Nationwide expects its customers to spend more than £125,000 a minute bagging Black Friday deals, the Building Society thinks around £180 million will be spent at shops and online today. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Andrea Felstead, who's writing about the perils of partaking in the Black Friday shopping spree. Andrea, good to see you this morning. And when we talk about perils, this is not the physical dangers that shoppers might endure, but also you're talking about the damage that Black Friday does to the environment and also to European retailers' margins. Let's start with the margin story. What's the pressure?
The pressure is I walked Oxford Street yesterday. There's lots of deals, blanket deals. Deloitte says the average discount in November has been around 27%, surprisingly about the same as last year, although the deals started earlier. Now, if you're a retailer, unless you have planned for those deals, so you've bought in special products, or you've maybe taken some stock that you would have put in your January sales anyway, you've brought it forward now because you think it will sell better and it shows you're participating in Black Friday, offering that level of discount, that is going to hurt your margins.
And does it just poach business from the December, period that you would have done anyway?
Exactly. This is known as the golden quarter. And what we've seen over the last 5-6 years as Black Friday's really got going is the peak used to be in December. Now it's November. November is taking more and more of those sales. They're likely to be at a discount, so that's bad for overall profitability.
And what's the tie-in with the environment? Because consumption in general is something, a backlash against consumption in general is something that retailers do fear, and it's something that the population at large is increasingly aware of. But is there something specific around Black Friday about is it that we just buy things we don't need? I mean, what's the environmental link?
I do think that's it. I think we are all tempted. I've done it myself. I've already spent on Black Friday on something that was on sale that I probably don't really need. We all just are tempted by those prices and we add to our own consumption. Now, the data is very interesting because it shows that pure online shopping, and Black Friday is still, in the UK at least, is very much an online event. Pure online shopping is actually better for the environment. But when you factor in things like maybe driving to a shop to pick it up, or Black Friday encourages lots of returns, very fast delivery, then it's bad for the environment. So it's that overall overconsumption plus the environmental impact of each sale.
And we do see Black Friday, of course, it's caught on in the UK to some extent. It started in the US, obviously. What about the rest of Europe? Because there's been less pickup in the rest of Europe, and actually we're seeing some of this backlash that you talk about in your story on environmental grounds.
Exactly. I mean, Europe was later. We probably started about a the start of the decade. Europe's only really got going for the past few years, but they are catching up. France and Germany in particular, they are catching up, and the consumers there do seem to be more aware. I mean, it's with environment and the consumer, you get a picture that some consumers are very, very engaged. There is a growing number of consumers who are very, very engaged. There's a large number of consumers who are quite engaged. So it's getting to that middle, the more people who are sort of quite engaged, encouraging them to be more aware of the environment. That's when it really gets going.
And I know that there's protest activity, for example, in one part of France anyway, and hashtag Block Friday is the sort of fight back against Black Friday. I noticed today also that H&M, and it might be coincidence or it might be entirely planned, they announced a rental store. I think it's in Stockholm, and this is a phenomenon that we're seeing at least a lot more talk about clothing rental rather than purchase. And now we're seeing one of the big retailers actually getting on board and experimenting as to how far this phenomenon can go, because that's a big question, isn't it?
That's right. H&M actually is one of the most engaged retailers on this. They've had a conscious collection since the 90s. They are really at the forefront of this. It's not surprising they have taken the first steps. We argued earlier in the year that actually rental could be quite good for retailers, particularly in the mid-market, because what rents well doesn't always sell well. And we've just talked about these multiple returns, this idea of wardrobe, and when you buy something, wear it, and then send it back. At the moment, the retailer's not engaged in that process. But if you maybe charge like a $5 for wearing a dress for a night and sending it back, you're doing all those things anyway, and you get paid for it.
I'm conscious of the environmental footprint of all that toing and froing of clothing, though.
Exactly.
So then we get stuck in another conversation, don't we? Andrea, thank you very much. We're going round in circles. Andrea Felsted joining us from Bloomberg Opinion. Thank you very much for the heads up there. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we'll talk about the German economy. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The owner of the British soccer team Manchester City has agreed to sell a more than 10% stake to the U.S. private equity firm Silver Lake. The deal by City Football Group puts a valuation on the business of $4.8 billion, one of the highest ever for a sports team. The transaction shows how surging TV revenue is drawing attention from investors like Silver Lake, which has traditionally focused on tech companies such as Dell Technologies and China's Alibaba Group. SoulCycle CEO Melanie Whalen has resigned. CNBC reports both sides felt it was time for a change in leadership, citing a person familiar with the situation. Whalen also is resigning her director position. SoulCycle provides indoor cycling classes to music. It has more than 93 studios in the U.S., Canada, and the U.K. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Witham offers VC expertise to address the advisory, audit, and tax needs of your investments.
I'm Chris DeMeo, Witham's Technology and Emerging Growth Services practice leader. The venture capital community continues to thrive in an era of disruption, fueling the growth of some of the greatest innovations over the last 25 years. Witham's Technology and Emerging Growth Services team services a variety of different venture-backed startups, lending predictive support and deep service experience, adding value to your portfolio.
Visit witham.com/VC for
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
They don't chant your name when you give blood, or sing songs about you. But patients and their families will remember you forever. Because your blood can change their lives. We need more blood donors in Tooting, the West End, and Edgware. Bleed for London. Join us today at blood.co.uk.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery's running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We heart in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
So if your party wins, can we expect a healthier NHS? Even with an ageing population? But what about privatisation?
With all the parties promising more NHS funding, how will they pay for it? From the NHS to taxation, the Times and the Sunday Times will guide you through. Pick up your copy today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked breads to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
It is 9:30 in London, 10:30 if you're in Paris or Berlin. I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. We're getting some breaking news coming through on the UK economy, so let's dive into a little bit of that. UK mortgage approvals fall to 64,000 or so in October. That was versus an estimate of around 65,000. So a little bit of movement on the mortgage approval side, a touch below the estimates. We've had a host of data already out of the UK, including the GfK consumer confidence at its lowest level heading into the election since 2010, so that's part of the background story on the UK. Let's get to the data. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio. The Stock 600 pretty flat actually, and with a slight downward bias, but not by much. And actually, we've seen a real pairing of the losses coming through on the European equity markets as we've been through the first hour and a half of the session. We were down as much as 0.4% in the earlier part of the trading day, but now we recover our poise just a little bit, and the FTSE 100 down 0.1%. The Xetra DAX down 0.2%, but the CAC 40 in Paris actually a touch positive, not by very much at all, but managing to keep its head in the green at least. That comes after a very negative session in Asia. The MSCI Asia Pacific was down 0.9%. In particular, the weakness came through in Hong Kong, down by more than 2%. A lot of specifics around the Hong Kong health sector and what China is planning there, and that seemed to spook markets, but also broadly concerns around protest activity in Hong Kong and what that's going to do to the conversations on trade between the US and China. All of that was in the dialogue yesterday as well, but we've been without the US for a day, of course, and that means that markets have had time to just drift without very much of a catalyst, not much news flow around trade. So Thanksgiving is now over, it's Black Friday, but that does mean that US markets will be back at least for a half day, and US futures suggest we'll see a little bit of weakness factoring in the selling of yesterday in Europe and in Asia. So US futures point down by between 2 or 0.3%. The yield on the US 10-year also in retreat, so we do see a little bit of buying of treasuries at this hour. 175.68 is the yield on the US 10-year right now. A little bit of weakness in oil prices comes in conjunction with those worries about global trade. We're down 0.2% on WTI. That's a look at where we are on the data then. Let's talk about the German economy. A debate around fiscal stimulus keeps rumbling in Europe. And while the ECB is calling for governments to take action, Germany is expected to continue ignoring these calls. We also have a fracture appearing in the German coalition, particularly in the junior coalition partner, the SPD. Let's talk about this live in Berlin. We're joined by Bloomberg Opinion's Andreas Kluth. Andreas, your thoughts, your expectations on whether we will see further fiscal stimulus coming through in the German budget today?
No, we will not. In the current year, they're going to have a slight surplus. They should, and in the budget for next year, which they're passing right now today, it'll be balanced again. They call it a black zero, exactly balanced budget, and it's a sort of fetish in Germany here. They've had that for years, when in fact the whole world, you said the ECB, it's not just the ECB, it's also Brussels and Washington, and every economist, mainstream economist, is basically saying Germany in particular needs to provide fiscal stimulus for the economy of the whole Eurozone, because some other countries like Italy cannot, and it refuses to do that.
Yes, it's interesting. I was looking at the unemployment data coming in from Germany, looked better than expected at the top of the hour, or just before the top of the hour. And then we got Italian unemployment numbers, which also showed some improvement, but really pointed a very dire picture for unemployment. And that's just, one measure and just one part of the Eurozone. But the numbers around youth unemployment in particular looking very weak. This goes right to the heart of the issue. The IMF and the ECB all calling for fiscal stimulus and for other actors to do more other than monetary policy, and yet those who have the capacity to act don't necessarily have the worst problems.
That's right. And so to put an even finer point on it, what you've just described is, will the members of the Eurozone, the 19 countries, will they continue to make economic policy thinking in national terms or thinking in as a group? And this is the problem with the whole European Union, and specifically the whole Eurozone. That's the dilemma.
That's the dilemma around fiscal transfer then. And let me ask you where the politics sits in Germany on this front, because if we're looking for any kind of bold fiscal moves, and I appreciate you said that's not going to happen today, but if anyone is looking for bold fiscal moves from Germany, you'd expect to need a strong political backdrop, a strong government or a strong coalition to do that. And there are cracks emerging, aren't there, in the coalition?
Yeah, and by the way, both parties in the coalition are eager to stick with this black zero, so it won't even come in that way. But yes, you're right. The coalition is at risk. I don't think it. I think it'll stumble on till the next general election, regularly scheduled election. After all, but what's happening is the Social Democrats, the junior party. They're down in the polls, and they keep ousting their own leaders, and now they had a leadership contest for the first time by all the party members got to vote, and that vote will be announced, the result of that tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. German time, and it's between two pairs, and one of them includes the current finance minister. Depending on which of these pairs wins, one pair said they will continue in the coalition. The other pair said they want to exit the coalition or renegotiate it, which won't happen. That will introduce instability, and we will know more 1 week later, so not this, but the coming weekend, when all the Social Democrats gather and make a formal decision on how to proceed with the Grand Coalition.
And so if the coalition is in question, Andreas, what happens? Do we find ourselves in an election situation and Angela Merkel bowing out of German politics, or is that not likely?
I think in German the political culture, and also this is one time when the German president would have a role. Usually he doesn't, it's ceremonial, but he would lean on everyone, they usually do, to preserve stability. So I don't think much will happen. But in terms of options, one option, and we just talked about the budget is now passed for 2020. That means in theory Angela Merkel could stay in government, in a minority government. Denmark, Spain, other countries have that. Germany doesn't, because of the Weimar experience, doesn't like to do that. She's ruled it out before, but that's possible. Another possibility is you bring elections forward. Another possibility is she works out a deal with the other parties that just gets tolerated. All these are options, but at the end of the day, I still think they will have a miserable, unhappy marriage, as it were, that goes to the full term.
Andreas, thanks very much for joining us from Berlin. Bloomberg Opinions, Andreas Kluth. That's the German politics and economic story of the moment then. Let's get to the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Anna, good morning. President Trump has made a surprise trip to Afghanistan to celebrate Thanksgiving with U.S. troops. He met the country's president and said peace talks have resumed with the Taliban and that he wants to persuade the militants to agree a ceasefire. The president also confirmed he wants to reduce troop levels to around 8,500 from the current 12,000 and may go even further. Here in the UK, the Conservative Party is accusing Channel 4 News of breaking impartiality rules. That's after the broadcaster used an ice sculpture to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He failed to attend a live climate change debate. That was last night. The programme featured leaders from other parties, but Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage chose not to attend. Staying in the UK, police are not reopening the sexual exploitation investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. This comes days after Prince Andrew sparked outrage with a TV interview about his friendship with a convicted sex offender who died in a New York jail. Bloomberg's Eddie Spence has more.
A human trafficking complaint was originally received by the Metropolitan Police in July 2015 concerning an individual brought to central London in March 2001. But the Met said Thursday that it wouldn't be appropriate to investigate further because most of the case would be focused outside of the UK. Epstein, a fund manager worth hundreds of millions of dollars, had been charged with sex trafficking. Eddie Spence, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And police have lifted their blockade on Hong Kong Polytechnic University. That's after officers cleared a campus that's been besieged for nearly 2 weeks amid a violent standoff with protesters. Bloomberg's Karen Lee reports.
Officers said they found thousands of petrol bombs at PolyU and items including bottles of corrosive chemical, bows, arrows, and damaged vehicles. It ends a standoff that transfixed the city as recent chaos brought unprecedented battles to the city's universities. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Leanne, thanks very much. Now for a roundup of the latest US sports news, here's Pete Fox.
From the day in the NFL, 3 games wrapped up with the Saints beating the Falcons in Atlanta 26-18. New Orleans now 10-2, 5-1 on the road. Drew Brees throwing for 184 and 1 touchdown. Matt Ryan 35 of 50 for 312, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Taysom Hill had a big day for the Saints. He ran for a touchdown and caught one as well. Prior to that, it was the Bills roughing up the Cowboys in Dallas 26-15. In spite of the Cowboys putting up some pretty decent numbers, Dak Prescott throwing for 355 and 2 touchdowns. Zeke Elliott running for 71. Amari Cooper had 8 receptions for 85 yards, but it was Cole Beasley with the big day against his former team. 110 in the air and 1 touchdown. And in D-Town, the Bears take down the Lions 24-20. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC Sports Update.
Pete, thanks very much for that. Still to come on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we look ahead to Eurozone inflation data with Mike Bell, global market strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. We've been building up a picture of Eurozone inflation gradually over the last day or two, and we'll ask questions about whether we're seeing a bottoming out in some of the worst data that came through on the Eurozone earlier on this year. A reminder, you can listen back to anything you've missed, BloombergRadio.com or the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Every investor should ask questions.
Is our money in the right place?
What am I really being charged? And is it eating into my returns?
Is my advisor a fiduciary? Is he always a fiduciary?
A good place to start is with an independent registered investment advisor. As fiduciaries, they live by a simple rule. Always act in the best interest of their clients. That's why Charles Schwab is proud to support more independent financial advisors and their clients than anyone else. Visit findyourindependengadvisor.com.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you imagine carving your way through the fresh snow falling right now in the French resort of Val d'Isère? Fly to Geneva and head to the slopes from only $29.99. Book now with EasyJet. Dream, dream. One way per person, limited availability. See easyjet.com.
There's a growing threat from Moscow Center, and Britain's intelligence service think they've found the man for the job.
The natural-born agent runner is his own man. He may take his orders from London, but in the field, he is the master of his fate and the fate of his agents.
A powerful portrait of our times, told with unflagging tension by one of the greatest novelists of our age, John le Carré's Agent Running in the Field. Available now at Waterstones.
There are plenty of parties over the festive period. They'll have food and drink, music too. Some will even have rides and fireworks. But one has all that, plus a big something extra. Big Game 12 is London's biggest rugby party. To watch Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers from just £17 a ticket for children and £27 for adults, go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
They don't chant your name when you give blood, or sing songs about you. But patients and their families will remember you forever. Because your blood can change their lives. We need more blood donors in Tooting, the West End and Edgware. Bleed for London. Join us today at blood.co.uk.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery's running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We heart in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Next. Nah. Nope. Boring. If you skip through loads of your TV channels, why are you paying loads of money for them? With TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre, you can access the nation's favourite TV shows, a world of films and sport, live and on demand, all for £25.95 a month for 18 months. And if you're quick, you'll even get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk. For everyone. Offer ends 5th of December, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
25% off. This week at Tesco, we're taking that exact percentage off wine and fizz when you buy 6 bottles or more. So, technically, every 4th glass is on us. Tesco, delivering Christmas for 100 years. 18 plus excludes Express and Scotland Max 36. Exclusions apply. Ends 2nd of December.
This Black Friday, save a massive 30% off Sky Superfast broadband, including anytime calls and guaranteed Wi-Fi in every room or money back. It's usually £42 a month, but now it's just £29 a month for 18 months plus £19.95 setup. So move sharpish. Offer ends 2nd of December. Search sky.com. Sky Fibre areas, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component £2 per month paid during current contract up to date of claim. Prices may change during contract. See sky.com/guarantee. Terms apply.
Fancy a weekend away with Peter Andre, Jason Donovan, Aqua, Atomic Kitten, Bewitched, Soul to Soul or Madness? Well, now's your chance on an over-18s only live music weekend at Butlins. You'll get 3 nights entertainment, accommodation, pool parties, silent discos and much more included in the price. And in our Black Friday event, you'll get up to an extra 40% off when you book by the 2nd of December. Start planning your Butlins live music weekend at bigweekends.com.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Anne-Marie Horderm with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It's the last day of trading for the month of November, and we are in the red on the Stock 600, down 0.1%. All the indices across Europe are really in the red as well, besides the CAC 40, which is relatively flat, but eking out a slight bit of gain. Hong Kong and the Hang Seng closed down more than 2% this morning. It weighed on the region. There's really a lack of clear, direct triggers for the slump. A lot of speculation was going around the market, but traders did cite policy jitters with China and uncertainty over the trade war. Treasury yields are steady as the bond market reopens in the United States after Thanksgiving. We trade 1.762 on the 10-year. U.S. day of trading today. The pound this morning a little bit weaker right now against the dollar. 1.2889 is where we trade. Of course, the UK election campaign continues. One of the latest being from Boris Johnson saying a no U.S. trade deal if the U.S. insists on keeping the NHS on the table. Euro a touch weaker as well. We did have also German unemployment data, which unexpectedly dropped versus what estimates were for a gain. And in oil this morning, we are seeing weakness on Brent crude, down 0.6%. OPEC signaling they will remain with the current deal, not cutting deeper, which maybe the market was looking for. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Anne-Marie. Israel is asking investors to treat it like a European market. 6 years ago, MSCI rejected the nation's bid to join its Europe index, but now it's trying again. It's reaching out to understand what needs to be done to remove any obstacles. Israel says its economy resembles Europe more than the Middle East. Now to Iraq, where nearly 40 people have been killed in one of the bloodiest days since anti-government protests begun, according to medics and officials. At least 25 people died when security forces opened fire to clear bridges in a southern city. Another 4 protesters died in Baghdad. Iraqis are demanding more jobs and an end to corruption and better public services. And finally, the world of social media can breathe a sigh of relief. Facebook and Instagram are up and running again. Facebook says it has resolved an issue with its central software system. The bug prevented users from accessing its family of apps. That was yesterday. Facebook owns Instagram. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Leanne, thank you very much. Now, coming up next, our colleagues in the US are back from their Thanksgiving, from their turkeys and nut roasts and whatever takes your fancy, and they're getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak. Wake up, John Tucker. Good morning. What is ahead for
17 people, and I had to cook. It was like
that is
barely
impressive.
It was all right. I mean, we had fun. The key to the successful dinner is just make sure everybody starts drinking early. So if it's bad,
make sure the turkey's big enough.
Right. Well, in addition to digesting our turkey, Anna, we're going to digest all the latest economic data with Steve Rasciuto this morning of Mizuho Securities. And we're also going to shop till we drop with Bloomberg intelligence analyst Poonam Goyal. A surprise visit to Afghanistan. We'll tell you about that. And as we head into the final trading day of November, the S&P 500 is up 2.8% on the month. The Dow Jones Industrial Average higher by nearly 3%. You want to guess what the biggest winner on the Dow has been so far?
Go on, tell me.
Walt Disney stock. And we have your stock scorecard just ahead on today's program. So join myself and Nathan Hager in a matter of minutes for Bloomberg Daybreak Americas.
Excellent. You can wake from your Thanksgiving food coma along with John Tucker and team with Bloomberg Daybreak in New York. They'll be waiting through the leftovers in the studio. Half day of trading, of course, for US stocks and treasuries. Bloomberg Daybreak is up next then from New York, or if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll have Bloomberg Surveillance. Let's talk about what's going on in the markets right now, and I'm pleased to say we're joined by Mike Bell, Global Market Strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. Let me ask you then, what's happening with the trade story for you then, Mike, because it seems that the market's drifted downwards a little bit in the absence of any positive catalyst around trade just in the last 24 hours, and now we're essentially flat, waiting for more trade headlines. Is that where we find ourselves?
Yeah, I think if you look at the market this year, you've seen pretty phenomenal rally in stocks on partly monetary stimulus, but partly expectation that you're going to get this trade deal. And now it's crunch time. We actually need to see whether the deal's going to get done or not. For me, it's always been more uncertain than the market seems to think that you're going to see any kind of meaningful resolution. Now, it's obviously still possible that we get this phase one trade deal, but the notion of calling it a phase one trade deal implies that there's more to come after that, and I'm pretty skeptical that there is.
Are any of your clients talking again about phase two, the possibility of phase three? It doesn't seem to feature in many conversations.
I think the common assumption is that there will be what China is willing to give put into the phase one deal, which will allow something to be delivered before the election. But then progress beyond that will be much more difficult because the fundamental tensions at the heart of the trade war in terms of state subsidies for specific industries, that seems like that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Where do you invest then with that as the backdrop? We've seen US stocks outperforming Chinese stocks in recent weeks as we've got into this latter stages of trying to hammer out the phase one trade deal. Do you see further relative upside for US stocks, or will the gains be made elsewhere?
For me, really from here, we're now at a point where the economic data spent the last 14 months slowing down, and we've maybe had 1 month of tentative signs of improvement. So either we see a re-acceleration in the data so that the manufacturing surveys all pick up, the leading indicators re-accelerate, and in that scenario I would expect emerging market Asia-type stocks to outperform. Or if we continue to decelerate, then we're a lot closer to the level at which that slowdown could become a stall for the economy. And I think in that scenario, I would expect the sort of value cheaper parts of the US market to outperform.
You mentioned where we are in the global growth story, and let me ask you about China, because some of our colleagues this morning writing about how China financial warning signs are flashing. They talk about rural bank runs, surging consumer indebtedness, bond restructurings, mounting signs of financial stress, essentially. Is that something that worries you?
Not particularly. I mean, if you look at the levels of corporate debt in China, they're elevated, but household and consumer debt remains at relatively low levels. So I think that you might well see losses come through, but is it going to be a systemic problem in the way that we saw around the rest of the world in 2008? That seems pretty unlikely to us. Still seeing signs of a quite meaningful slowdown in China in terms of the industrial profit data, for example, still remaining quite weak. Whilst we had a bit of a pickup in the Caixin PMI, the other data is not suggesting that you're seeing that, and potentially you're just seeing a bit of a front loading of demand in anticipation of this potential December tariff increase. So I think we need a bit more evidence really as we head into the new year that we're seeing a sustainable turnaround, and at the moment it seems a little bit too early to call that.
And talking of sustainable turnarounds in data, some of the German data seems to have been improving of late, and we got the joblessness numbers today. We actually saw a drop in joblessness by 16,000 in the month of November. The estimate had been for a rise. So once again, a piece of data out of Germany that looks a little better than was expected, despite the threats to the export model, despite the threats to the auto sector at this point. Have we seen a bottoming out in European data, or specifically Germany, wherever you prefer to focus the conversation?
I think it's absolutely critical what happens to German employment, because you've had now 2 quarters of very weak growth, just avoiding recession by 0.1% last quarter. And the manufacturing sector in Germany, still, the employment components of the PMIs there are telling you there's a risk of job cuts coming in the manufacturing sector. So the concern I have is that if those job cuts come through, and we've seen some examples over the last couple of weeks with large automakers shedding sort of north of 10% of their German workforce. If that starts to spread into the service sector, then the German economy could have a more meaningful slowdown, and that could then start to spread to the rest of the Eurozone. It's notable, if you look at job vacancies, they've started declining on a year-on-year basis in Germany, and for what it's worth in Japan, the UK and US. And this is actually the first time since 2008 that we've seen job vacancies in all 4 of those countries declining. So you tend to see job vacancies decline before payrolls get cut. So that's just one potential warning sign that I would want to see go away before sounding the all clear.
And when we're talking fiscal stimulus for some governments, seeing evidence of impact on jobs might be one of the hurdles to fiscal stimulus.
I think so. I think it's going to take deterioration in the labour market before you see meaningful fiscal stimulus in Germany.
Let's just get your thoughts as we close out the conversation, Mike, on what's going on in the UK, because of course we're just a couple of weeks away from the election. Your thoughts on UK assets, as we see Boris Johnson saying this morning that the UK is working on a dozen trade deals, and he's got oven deals to be done in terms of Brexit. What are your thoughts on UK assets?
I was looking at the polls from 2017 and comparing them with today, and the sharp rise in Labour's polling over the last few weeks looks very similar to what you saw in 2017. So even though you had the recent YouGov poll of over 100,000 people suggesting the Conservatives are going to get a majority, I think it's a bit early to call that. So I think with a couple of weeks more to go to the election, it makes sense not to be taking big bets on the politics in the UK. We're pretty neutral, particularly in terms of size, making sure we're not overweight those mid and small cap stocks. going into the election.
Okay, plenty of political voices reminding us there's still 2 weeks to go. You know, it's not a done deal trying to get their bases out in terms of that vote. Mike, thank you very much. Mike Bell, Global Market Strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. Coming up in the next hour, Daybreak with Nathan Hager and John Tucker coming to you from New York. Or if you're listening in London on DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keane and Guy Johnson. Plenty more on the markets then as we sort of hold on to recent gains on equity markets here in Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine carving your way through the fresh snow falling right now in the French resort of Val d'Isère. Fly to Geneva and head to the slopes from only $29.99. Book now with EasyJet. One way per person, limited availability. See easyjet.com.
There are plenty of parties over the festive period. They'll have food and drink, music too. Some will even have rides and fireworks. But one has all that, plus a big something extra. Big Game 12 is London's biggest rugby party. To watch Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers from just £17 a ticket for children and £27 for adults, go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Next. Nah. Nope. Boring. If you skip through loads of your TV channels, why are you paying loads of money for them? With TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre, you can access the nation's favourite TV shows, a world of films and sport, live and on demand, all for £25.95 a month for 18 months. And if you're quick, you'll even get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk. For everyone. Offer ends 5th of December, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Friday, November 29th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks slump as we kick off the final trading day of November.
Consumers flood stores on this biggest shopping day of the year.
FedEx and UPS feel pressure from a shortened holiday shopping season.
And currency traders at Morgan Stanley come under fire for allegedly hiding losses.
During a surprise Thanksgiving visit to Afghanistan, President Trump says talks have resumed with the Taliban. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm Rob Bushka. Coming up in sports, there's nothing like getting away for the holidays. Ask the NFL road teams. And the Devils needed 6 to win north of the border.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm John Tucker.
I'm Nathan Hager. Global stocks are lower to start this holiday shortened trading day. U.S. stocks stop trading at 1 p.m. while the bond market closes at 2. It's coming up to 5:01 in the morning on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are lower by almost 7 points. Dow futures down 56. NASDAQ futures lower by 25 points. The DAX in Germany is down a 1/10%, while the CAC in Paris is up a 1/10%. FTSE in London little changed. The 10-year's up 1/32, yield 1.76% on a 10-year note. The 2-year just shy of 1.62%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.25%, down 13 cents, $57.99 a barrel. COMEX gold little changed, up $1.10 at $14.6190 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1003 against the dollar, and the yen is at 109.57. John.
And Nathan, we begin in Asia, where stocks posted sharp declines on this last trading day of the month. Hong Kong led losses with a 2% drop for the Hang Seng. And Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Juliet, good morning.
Good morning, John and Nathan. The sudden sell-off in Hong Kong stocks spread to the onshore market, with selling accelerating amid nervousness over a lack of clear triggers for the slump. Markets had held up fairly resilient Thursday in the wake of President Trump signing a bill in support of Hong Kong protesters. Elsewhere, the risk-off tone saw the Nikkei 225 close down 0.5% to 23,293 points in Tokyo, while the Kospi shared 1.5% on growth concerns. The Bank of Korea Friday leaving rates on hold at 1.25%. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sarli, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Oil is heading for its fourth weekly gain, the longest winning streak since April. That's ahead of a key OPEC meeting next week to set future production cuts. We get more from Bloomberg market strategist Mark Cranfield.
If OPEC insists on holding the cuts about the same level as where they are now, then that is probably priced into the oil market already. They would need to come up with bigger cuts than the market is currently thinking about for them to get the oil price much higher. If, of course, they don't even meet those standards, then the downside potential is pretty good for oil here, because we've already had a rally in anticipation of this OPEC meeting. So there's quite a lot resting on this, and we could see a decent move either way. But to push it higher, OPEC need to surprise the market.
And checking prices now, they're lower on the session. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.2% or 12 cents at $57.98 a barrel. Brent, the international benchmark, is down 0.75% or 48 cents at $63.39.
We have a bit of a drama brewing at Morgan Stanley. Sources tell us currency traders at the firm are under fire for allegedly hiding losses. Here with the story, Bloomberg's Richard McCauley.
Morgan Stanley has either fired or placed on leave at least 4 traders, and we understand that this relates to an alleged mismarking of securities. It appears to be about concealing a loss. That loss could be between $100 million US and $140 million. We also know that the bank is investigating the suspected mismarking, and that the securities in question are linked to emerging market currencies. Now, Morgan Stanley has declined to comment to Bloomberg, but our reporting shows that 2 of the traders were based in London, the other 2 were in New York.
And this news comes as Morgan Stanley's currency options desk struggled this year thanks to a slump in volatility that traditionally generates profits for traders.
Today is the biggest shopping day of the year, with consumers flooding into retail stores across the country. JCPenney opened its doors at 2 p.m. yesterday, followed by Macy's and Kohl's 3 hours later. Let's get more on the Black Friday action now from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
36% of consumers plan on heading to stores today, according to a survey from PwC. That's fewer than in past years as shopping continues to shift online. Retailers remain aggressive with promotions in key gift-giving categories such as electronics and toys. JCPenney is offering 80% off some fine jewelry, while Macy's is giving away 13 items for free after rebates. Cyber Monday should see a big gain in sales. Deloitte projects 16% growth, bringing this year's total volume for Cyber Monday to $9.2 billion. In New York, I'm Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Jeff, thanks. What a big brick and mortar. It's also the start of a big season for FedEx and UPS. Shippers could be under more pressure this year as a late date for Thanksgiving shortens the shopping season. We get details from Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Transportation Analyst Lee.
The time between Thanksgiving and Christmas is compressed. It's typically around 30 days over the last 5 years. This year it's only 26 days, and last year it was 32 days. So it's a compressed time period. And also, we are expecting e-commerce packages to increase around 10% from last year. So more time in less time, and that is going to increase the execution risk that the parcel carriers like FedEx and UPS are going to face this year during peak season.
FedEx and UPS have invested in technology and automation to increase efficiency, but a tighter time frame may still strain their networks.
Facebook and Instagram Instagram are back up and running after outages over the Thanksgiving holiday. Facebook says it resolved an issue with its central software that prevented users from accessing some of its apps.
And as we head into the final trading day of November, S&P 500 up 2.8% on the month. The Dow is higher by nearly 3%. Biggest winner of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, Walt Disney, with shares up 16% on the month. The other leaders include United Health, Walgreens, Boeing, and Apple.
Now, the biggest loss on the Dow this month belongs to Home Depot. Shares are down nearly 5% in November. The only other stocks on the index to post declines this month are Cisco Systems, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Verizon, and McDonald's. Bloomberg customers can see all the biggest risers and fallers by typing MRRGO on the terminal. Futures pointing to a lower open on this holiday shortened trading day. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Nathan. 5:07 on Wall Street, and let's get news from around the world this morning. We say good morning to Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, John. After surprising American troops in Afghanistan for Thanksgiving, President Donald Trump headed back to the U.S. for an extended holiday weekend at his resort in Florida. President Trump made his first visit to the site of America's longest war on Thursday.
But there's nowhere I'd rather celebrate this Thanksgiving than right here with the toughest, strongest, best and bravest warriors on the face of the earth. You are indeed that.
Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove has more from Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan.
President Trump just came here for a few hours or so. He arrived and served Thanksgiving dinner to the U.S. troops who are stationed here. After that, he met with the Afghanistan president, and during that bilateral meeting, announced that Taliban peace talks had resumed.
The president says the U.S. wants the Taliban to agree to a ceasefire and will continue to reduce its troop commitment to the region. China has reacted furiously after President Trump signed two bills aimed at supporting human rights in Hong Kong. China says the implementation of the bills will undermine cooperation in important areas. Hong Kong police ended their blockade of a university campus today after surrounding it for 12 days to try to arrest anti-government protesters holed up inside. Police removed a stash of nearly 4,000 gasoline bombs left behind by protesters who fought pitched battles about 2 weeks ago with riot officers on surrounding streets. The standoff at Hong Kong Polytechnic University was one of the most dramatic episodes in nearly 6 months of unrest that began in June. Gun rights advocates backed by President Trump hope a U.S. Supreme Court clash over New York City restrictions on transporting firearms will be a Second Amendment victory. With the conservative majority strengthened by two Trump appointees, the court on Monday will hear a case that could produce its first ruling bolstering gun rights since 2010. Over 3 million spectators turned out for the 93rd annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York.
The parade is so great, it's so big. This is my second time here, and it's just great. I'm here with my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandkids.
I don't miss this for nothing in the world.
It just reminds you of what you should be thankful for, and it's just a great time.
Global news, 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thanks a lot. 5:10 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. And good morning, Rob Bushka.
Good morning, John. All three road teams picked up Thanksgiving Day wins, two in dominating fashion as Buffalo continues to rep the Empire State to the tune of 9-3 after crushing the Cowboys in Big D.
Snap, Allen, lock left side, checks down. He runs, sprints, pumps. 15, 10, 5 to the end zone line. He's in. Touchdown, Josh Allen.
Westwood won on the call 26-15 as former Cowboy wideout Cole Beasley got some revenge. 6 receptions, 110 yards, and a touchdown. Dallas falls to 6-6. The Bears took advantage of the Lions' third-string quarterback to hold on for a 24-20 win in Detroit. Bears quarterback Mitch Trubisky.
I just feel like I'm doing my job. It's my job to get the ball to the playmakers. Whatever the defense gives us, I got to put the ball in the right spot, especially when everyone else does their job. O-line did a great job protecting. Everybody was in the right spot. Jesper ran his route, and you gotta just keep getting better, and you're proud of that growth, but it's bottom line, I gotta just do my job.
Chicago overcame a monstrous game from Detroit's Kenny Golladay. 4 catches, 158 yards, and a touchdown. When you think of the Saints, it's usually Alvin Kamara and Drew Brees, but the man they call the Swiss Army knife showed us his versatility.
Hill takes it, he's going to run straight ahead. First down, and Moy breaks free. 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown. How about Saints touchdowns by Taysom Hill.
Westwood won as Taysom Hill blocked a punt, ran for a touchdown, caught another. New Orleans rolls Atlanta 26-18. Hockey, the Devils scored 6 in Montreal to outlast the Canadiens 6-4. And that's your NBC Bloomberg Sports Update. John?
All right, thanks, Rob. And tune in tonight for the Bloomberg Business and Sports Show. That's when we speak with Mike Orozco, Commissioner of the AAC. He weighs in on college football rankings and media rights in collegiate sports. Catch that conversation tonight at 8, tomorrow at 11, right here on Bloomberg Radio, or subscribe to Bloomberg Business and Sports wherever you get your podcasts. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elated by... There's a growing threat from Moscow Center, and Britain's intelligence service think they've found the man for the job.
The natural-born agent runner is his own man. He may take his orders from London, but in the field, he is the master of his fate and the fate of his agents.
A powerful portrait of our times, told with unflagging tension by one of the greatest novelists of our age, John le Carré's Agent Running in the Field. Available now at Waterstones.
When Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers, it's always a big game. But this year, it's the big game. Hosted at Twickenham, you can expect fireworks on the field and off it. Pre-kick-off, enjoy music, entertainment and a truly incredible atmosphere. Then watch 2 Gallagher Premiership rugby giants go head-to-head. Tickets from just £17 children, £27 adults. Go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
So do you really think your party's manifesto is plausible, or is it just an election bribe?
Get an in-depth look at all the main party manifestos. From public services to immigration, the Times and the Sunday Times will guide you through. Pick up your copy today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
There is simply nothing else like it. Giraffe strut, birds swoop, gazelles leap. And as the music soars, the entire Serengeti comes to life around you. This is Disney's The Lion King. Experience it at London's Lyceum Theatre. Visit thelionking.co.uk.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
Predicting the weather is
Always a challenge, no matter where you are in the world. To get ahead, one company is turning to supercomputers. I spoke to the CEO of The Weather Company. It's a subsidiary of IBM. Cameron Clayton told me that the new tech will give faster, more precise forecasts, and for the first time, it will cover the entire planet.
We've just launched IBM Graph, which is a global high-resolution weather model, the first of its kind in the world. And we built it because we've sort of seen this meteorological divide. The rest of the world doesn't have the same quality weather forecasting we enjoy here in the United States. And so at IBM and the Weather Company, we've been working for the last 2.5 years to build this new global weather model.
What are you hoping to achieve with it? Are you really looking at forecasting to help save lives? I mean, what really is the end goal?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we do come back to saving lives, and that's sort of the mission our team has. But when we look at weather and the volatility of weather increasing around the world, we also see that it's disproportionately impacting the poorer countries and the poorer people in the world versus the richer nations.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. U.S. equity futures are edging lower, setting up a lackluster end to a third straight month of increases for major global benchmarks. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are lower by 7 points. Dow futures down 62. NASDAQ futures a loss of 24 points. The DAX in Germany is down 0.2%. CAC in Paris a little changed. The 10-year is up 230 seconds, I should say. Yield on a 10-year Treasury 1.75%. The 2-year yields 1.61%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.2% or 12 cents to $58 even a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1%, up $1.60, $14.6240 for an ounce of gold. The euro is at 1.1007 against the dollar. The yen at 109.55. We have a half day of trading on Wall Street on this Black Friday. Stocks stop trading at 1 p.m. while the bond market closes at 2. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, with more on what's going on around the world, we say good Black Friday morning to Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. President Trump marked the Thanksgiving holiday with a surprise trip to Afghanistan to thank American troops stationed there. The president traveled to Bagram Airfield on Thursday, where he served turkey, spent time with the troops, and had a brief meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. During the trip, he announced that peace talks with the Taliban have resumed. Malls are expected to be packed today as shoppers are looking for Black Friday sales. Some stores were open on Thanksgiving night. In sports in the NFL, for the Thanksgiving buffet, the Saints beat the Falcons in the late game, 26-18. The Bills down the Cowboys, and the Bears came from behind to beat the Lions. In the NHL, the Devils won. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thanks a lot. 5:20 on Wall Street, and we're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. In addition to digesting our turkey, we're digesting all the latest economic data. With Steve Rasciuto now, he's the chief U.S. economist at Mizuho Securities. Good Friday morning to you, Steve. The data we got this week, some of it was bang up, and then there's maybe some reason for pause if you look at something like the auto sales. What's your reading?
Well, clearly, the consumer numbers in general were a little bit lackluster. You have to remember we were in the middle of a strike for some of this period with regard to GM, and we had an environment in which they weren't discounting as heavily as you would normally expect them to discount, and there was some adjustments taking place in terms of the short-term interest rates that are applied on some of the leases. So I think we're going to see a lot of that consumer spending number come right back now that things have cleared up and the auto manufacturers can get back to focusing in on boosting sales as we go forward. It is getting harder and harder to drive sales up from these levels, but at least it will no longer be as much of a drag going forward.
Is it a mixed soup otherwise?
I think the rest of the data has actually done some very, very important adjustments to the upside, not only the investment expenditure numbers, which surprised to the upside substantially, but also the trade deficit numbers, which surprised to the downside. So what you're seeing here is a little bit of the mix of the GDP numbers changing as we begin the fourth quarter of the year, where the trade numbers and the investment expenditure numbers pick up and the consumer numbers weaken a little bit. So I think on average, where you have these nowcasters in the range of 0.5 to less to zero, basically, are going to be revised upward towards the 1% level, especially with the consumer numbers. Although they were flat, they didn't drop down, and the inflation numbers were a bit favorable as well. So I think you're going to have about a 1% number come through.
Okay, 1%. With the employment figures, is a recession anywhere in the offing? Could you possibly have a recession when you have a job market like we have in the U.S.?
It's very hard to have a recession when you have no excesses, whether it be in the real sector or in the financial sector, that are coming home to roost, especially in an environment where interest rates aren't particularly high, where they've actually been weakening in general, and where the Fed has cut interest rates 3 times. So I would say what we're really looking at is what Alan Greenspan once talked about as a pause that refreshes. And it was supposed to take place in the third quarter. It didn't. It actually began at the end of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. And that's really the period of the GM strike. And now that that's over, you're starting to see things like the manufacturing numbers come back and things like that. So at the end of that, you'll wind up picking up those consumer spending numbers probably in November and December.
Okay, so the November job gains, they'll surpass the year-to-date average because of those returning GM workers, you think?
There's no doubt about that. Now, you'll have to strip that out, and then you'll be right around the average numbers after that's over with. But again, the employment numbers are going to continue to be on the firm side, and anything above 100,000 is really enough to continue to keep that unemployment rate from going up.
We're in the quiet period for the policymakers ahead of the FOMC meeting for December, but their intentions, are they pretty much abundantly clear at this point?
I think they are. I think, all the comments we've heard from Jerome Powell and from other members of the FOMC board kind of imply that they feel they've done what they needed to do. Oh, by the way, they've done exactly the same amount that, from an interest rate perspective, that Alan Greenspan did in his long 10-year expansion in terms of a mid-course correction. And then they added the bill purchases on top of it. And I think they'll eventually expand out from the bill purchases to buying short-term coupons as well to help keeping the curve a little bit steeper than it had been. They're not going to let the curve go back to zero again between 2s and 10s.
Stock market, your outlook right now, well, a little pricey right now, U.S. stocks, and I wonder what, if anything, is an alternative to U.S. stocks at this point.
Well, the real question is, as you're implying, is where do I put my money? And that's a really, really good issue. What you're seeing is that actually money market mutual fund yields have gone up dramatically. And with money market mutual fund yields going up, you've seen the balance of money market mutual funds go up as well. So some of the people who've kept their money on the sidelines are doing it because they do have a bit of an alternative. Short-term interest rates are high enough where people don't feel as forced into the equity market going forward. Again, when you look at the valuations, you look at the earnings growth numbers, you look at how we've come through the earnings season, yes, the equity market's expensive, but it's nowhere near a bubble. And therefore, people are being cautious about putting additional money to work. But the major sell-off that we had last year at this time is not going to repeat itself this year. We're going to end the year, we're up on a year-over-year basis about 25%. Relative to September, October of last year, which was the peak, we're up a couple of percentage points, and that's where we should be given the earnings growth story.
Steve, always a pleasure. Stephen Rasciuto, Chief U.S. Economist at Mizuho Securities. Ahead of the cash open on Wall Street, again, an abbreviated trading day. Dow futures down 61. The NASDAQ E-mini futures 25 points lower. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. The U.S. stock market has an abbreviated day today on this Black Friday as investors return from the Thanksgiving break. U.S. stocks are on track for a third straight month of gains, but investors are also still hungry for evidence of progress on a U.S.-China trade deal. As Black Friday kicks off the traditional holiday shopping season, there's a lot on the line. For a department store like Macy's or Kohl's, a third or more of annual revenue is captured in the fourth quarter of the year. Sales on Thanksgiving itself are on the rise
businesses in the U.S., according to Adobe Analytics, which forecasts 2019 as the first year that online sales surpass $4 billion on the holiday. A larger portion of these transactions are also being made on our smartphones. Separately, a Deloitte survey shows that 79% of U.S. respondents plan to go shopping over the 5-day holiday weekend, and that is more than last year. Looks like we could see a lower Wall Street open this morning. The stock futures are slipping. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Batteries running low? Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We heart in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Next. Nah. Nope. Boring. If you skip through loads of your TV channels, why are you paying loads of money for them? With TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre, you can access the nation's favourite TV shows, a world of films and sport, live and on demand, all for £25.95 a month for 18 months. And if you're quick, you'll even get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk. For everyone. Offer ends 5th of December, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
So if your party wins, can we expect a healthier NHS? Even with an ageing population? But what about privatisation?
With all the parties promising more NHS funding, how will they pay for it? From the NHS to taxation, the Times and the Sunday Times will guide you through. Pick up your copy today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
There is simply nothing else like it. Giraffe strut, birds swoop, gazelles leap. And as the music soars, the entire Serengeti comes to life around you. This is Disney's The Lion King. Experience it at London's Lyceum Theatre. Visit thelionking.co.uk.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning, I'm John Tucker.
I'm Nathan Hager. We're just about 4 hours away now from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Global stocks are declining on this final trading day of the month after steep losses in Asia. Hong Kong led declines in the region with a 2% drop for the Hang Seng. We get more from Bloomberg FX and rate strategist Richard Jones.
It's really been sort of relentless today in Asia. Second day of losses, and today seems to have picked up a little bit of momentum. It's been a really choppy month, I think a very difficult month. All of the positivity that we've seen on trade has kind of had the air taken out of it because of this latest move by President Trump on Hong Kong and signing that bill into law. So further resolution on trade doesn't seem to be forthcoming, and I think equities are taking a hit for it today.
The MSCI Asia Pacific Index fell nearly 1% today. Europe's Stock 600 is down 0.1%, while S&P futures are lower by 0.2%.
And we have a bit of drama brewing at Morgan Stanley, with sources telling us the firm has placed on leave or fired at least 4 currency traders. They're accused of hiding losses linked to emerging market trades. More of the story from Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
Sources say Morgan Stanley is investigating whether the 4 mismarked securities to conceal as much as $140 million in losses. The traders include Scott Eisner and Rodrigo Yola in London. No comment from any of them. One source tells us Morgan Stanley's currency options desk has struggled this year because of a lack of volatility, and a source says the company apparently already booked some of the losses last quarter. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Denise, thanks. Today is the biggest shopping day of the year, with more than a third of consumers planning to hit brick-and-mortar stores across the country. Retailers remain aggressive with promotions in key gift-giving categories like electronics and toys. Bert Flickinger is Managing Director of Strategic Resource Group.
Auto sales will be strong, e-commerce strong, off-price strong, with the demarcation of a lot of trouble in the department store sector and even tougher times ahead for department stores.
Cyber Monday should see a big gain in sales. Deloitte projects 16% growth, bringing this year's total volume for Cyber Monday to $9.2 billion.
And some breaking news across the Bloomberg this morning. Daimler aims to cut thousands of jobs worldwide by the end of 2022. That's just crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Nathan.
All right, John, thanks. We'll watch Daimler shares this morning on the Bloomberg terminal. Right now, S&P futures are lower by 6 points. Dow futures down 58. NASDAQ futures down 23.5 points. 10 years up 1/32, the yield 1.76%, 2-year Treasury yield close to 1.62%, and the euro is at 1.1006 against the dollar. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Nathan. It's now 5:33 on Wall Street, and let's get news from around the world this morning. We say good morning to Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
John, thank you very much. President Donald Trump's more than 3-hour Thanksgiving fly-in to Afghanistan was a closely guarded secret to ensure his security. After what seemed like a normal day at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, with a round of morning golf, the president was flown back to the Washington area. The president then traveled to Bagram Airfield Thursday, where he served turkey and spent time with the troops. President Trump also announced that peace talks with the Taliban are back on.
We've hit them so hard, they've never been hit this hard. In the history of the war, they have never been hit this hard. And they want to make a deal. So we'll see what happens. If they make it, fine. If they don't make it, that's fine.
Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove at Bagram Airfield reports the president also had a brief meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani.
The brief Thanksgiving trip for the president, a surprise trip for the president, who last we saw was in Florida and took this trip to celebrate Thanksgiving with the troops here.
After the secret trip, President Trump headed back to the U.S. The U.S. State Department is now confirming that an unspecified number of Americans are among the cruise ship passengers killed in a horrific crash Wednesday in Belize. Local police superintendent Alejandro Coho says the cause of the 2-vehicle crash is still being investigated.
There was a head-on collision which causes the death of the 4 Belizean nationals and the 3 foreigners, injuring several other persons.
The cruise line passengers were traveling on a 7-day voyage on the Carnival Vista, which departed from Galveston and was expected to return tomorrow. Hong Kong police have reported that they have reopened public access to a university campus after blocking it for 12 days to try to arrest protesters holed up inside. A cordon around the university has been lifted, and investigators have left Hong Kong Polytechnic University. About 100 officers first entered the campus to collect evidence and remove dangerous items. It is that time of the year. The crowds, the merchandise, the Black Friday sales, oh, the humanity.
It's crazy. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it's the first time.
Everyone's just so frantic. They just want to get everything.
Some shoppers crowded stores on Thanksgiving night to snap up sales, and malls are expected to be busy today. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. Michael Barr, this is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you very much. Coming up on 5:36 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's Rob Bushka.
Good morning, John. The road teams made it a perfect 3-0 on Thanksgiving as Buffalo props up the state with their 9-3 record thanks to quarterback Josh Allen as they beat Dallas 26-15.
Those are usually tough, but we stuck to what we liked, putting some game plan stuff for their defense, and our guys went out there and executed. And to ask that from them on a short week, they did a phenomenal job. From route running to concepts that we put in, to blocking schemes, and like I said, credit all those guys too.
Former Dallas wide receiver Cole Beasley came up big with 110 yards on 6 grabs and a touchdown. Dallas still leads the NFC East at 6-6. Chicago held off Detroit and their third-string quarterback in a 24-20 win and a resurgence for quarterback Mitch Trubisky.
Here's the snap. Trubisky fakes the toss, lobs it up for the end zone. It is caught. Touchdown, Chicago. Jesper Horsted with a fingertip catch. What a throw by Trubisky.
Trubisky finished with 338 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Bears are also 6-6. You know who's not 6-6? The Saints, after beating the Falcons 26-18, becoming the first team to clinch a playoff spot. Their coach, Sean Payton.
Whirlwind of a game. Just proud of how we finished. Made it a little bit more difficult than it should have been. And yet, our guys battled and hung in there. Defensively, I thought we played outstanding.
New Orleans is 10-2 thanks to Taysom Hill, who ran for a touchdown, caught another, and even blocked a punt. NHL, the Devils beat the Habs north of the border 6-4. Rangers dropped the puck in Boston at 1 o'clock. Oops, New York hosts Philadelphia. Brooklyn entertains Boston. That's your NBC Bloomberg Sports Update. John?
All right, thanks. And it is now 5:37 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now, with a cover on Google at war, how the company's fighting with employees who were doing business with the government. Joshua Brustein wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
Early last year, Google employees began objecting to what had been a secret military program called Project Maven to use advanced artificial intelligence technology to analyze drone imagery.
You can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can subscribe to the magazine at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. Where it is now 5:39 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. And for that, we're joined live by Bloomberg's Chuck Kamlick. Chuck, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you. Stocks riding a 4-day winning streak as we begin this Black Friday morning. The Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P all at record highs today. Futures, though, just a bit lower this morning. A couple of issues. There's some concern that China trade negotiations might be hurt by the president's support for Hong Kong protesters. The other issue is all that turkey that may have been eaten by a lot of traders, and they're just laying low. Black Friday morning, a lot of blurry eyes, as Michael mentioned. Tri-state area malls like Danbury Mall, Roosevelt Field, they've been at this Black Friday shopping thing for hours now, opening at 5 in some cases, 6 last night, staying open until maybe 10 tonight or even longer. A new entry, though, in New Jersey and Paramus, Toys R Us is open again. That's where it was based for years. Now it's in the Westfield Garden State Plaza. The store, which is now under new ownership, was not open yesterday, but will reopen at 7 this morning. And personal financial website Wallet Hub says the average New Yorker will spend $753 shopping for Christmas. The folks on the other coast, though, Palo Alto specifically, will drop a jaw-dropping $3,160. And a non-shopping story. Morgan Stanley has reportedly ousted at least 4 traders who may have tried to cover up losses of about $140 million. With the Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report, I'm Chuck Kamlick. Now back to you, John.
All right, thanks, Chuck. And it's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Steve Podoskin on 1010 Wins in New York. We're talking about Morgan Stanley firing 4 traders, claiming they mismarked securities to cover up millions in losses.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. Saudi Arabia has had enough of other OPEC Plus producers cheating on quotas.
I'm Caroline Hetker on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on consumer confidence in the UK dropping to the lowest level in 6 years as households worry about the election and Brexit.
I'm Tom Busby, and on KMOX in St. Louis, I'll be reporting on U.S. farm income expected to rise this year, but only because of taxpayer bailouts.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobilely impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
There's a growing threat from Moscow Center, and Britain's intelligence service think they found the man for the job.
The natural-born agent runner is his own man. He may take his orders from London, but in the field, he is the master of his fate and the fate of his agents.
A powerful portrait of our times, told with unflagging tension by one of the greatest novelists of our age, John le Carré's Agent Running in the Field. Available now at Waterstones.
Now is the time for a little kindness. It's easy to feel overwhelmed these days, and everyone deserves a time out. Head to austria.info/kindness to tell us about someone who should win a holiday to Austria's beautiful ski slopes. With a pinch of luck, they'll be enjoying the snow, sun, and serenity of a winter paradise in no time. Visit austria.info/kindness now.
Next. Nah. Nope. Boring. If you skip through loads of your TV channels, why are you paying loads of money for them? With TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre, you can access the nation's favourite TV shows, a world of films and sport, live and on demand, all for £25.95 a month for 18 months. And if you're quick, you'll even get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk. For everyone. Offer ends 5th of December, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
There is simply nothing else like it. Giraffe strut, bird swoop, gazelles leap. And as the music soars, the entire Serengeti comes to life around you. This is Disney's The Lion King. Experience it at London's Lyceum Theatre. Visit thelionking.co.uk.
24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
To meet with American troops, President Trump marked the Thanksgiving holiday with a surprise visit to Afghanistan.
Presidents throughout history have sought to visit combat troops to boost morale, check conditions, and remind the country of their service. President Trump announced negotiations with the Taliban have resumed after coming to a halt when a Taliban attack killed a U.S. soldier. Franco Ordonez traveling with the president on Air Force One.
The day known as Black Friday is here. Retailers say they're ready.
Amazon, Walmart, and some others have made promises to get their packages to the purchaser's door within 24 hours of placing their order. With bad weather and more people shopping online, along with one less shopping week this year between Thanksgiving and Christmas, this first week of the official-unofficial shopping season will be a real test of those delivery promises.
There's Jim Roop. U.S. financial markets open later this morning, but close at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. Futures are edging lower on this holiday-shortened trading day. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. On Bloomberg, S&P futures are lower by 6 points. Dow futures down 58. NASDAQ futures down 24 points. The DAX in Germany down 0.1%. CAC in Paris, little changed. 10-year is up 230 seconds, yield 1.75%. The 2-year at 1.61%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil, little change, down 3 cents, $58.08 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.1%, up $2, $14.6280 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1004 against the dollar. The yen at 109.55. Daimler says it plans to eliminate thousands of jobs by the end of 2022 in an effort to revive profit margins squeezed by heavy investments in electric and self-driving vehicles. The German automaker says it wants to cut spending by $1.5 billion. Right now, shares of Daimler are down 0.6% in Germany. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. President Trump made a surprise Thanksgiving visit to Afghanistan, saying that peace talks with the Taliban have resumed amid a push for a ceasefire and to reduce U.S. deployment in the region. The president landed at Bagram Airfield and greeted U.S. soldiers over a turkey dinner before meeting with Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani. On this busy Black Friday shopping day, most consumers admit that they have taken time at work to open their browser and shop. According to new research from the advertising exchange OpenX and the Harris poll, 69% of the 2,000 consumers surveyed admit to shopping at work. In sports, in the NFL Thanksgiving buffet, the Saints beat the Falcons in the late game 26-18. The Bills downed the Cowboys, and the Bears came from behind to beat the Lions. In the NHL, the Devils won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
And it's now 5:49 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion this morning. It's the most wonderful time of the year when we shop till we drop. It is Black Friday. We're joined live now by Andrea Felstad, Bloomberg Opinion columnist in our London bureau, who's writing about a U.S. export to Europe. Black Friday. Is it taking hold over there?
Oh, certainly. I'd say it's been a big thing in the UK since about 2010, and the last few years it's also spread into France and Germany and other places in continental Europe.
And how's it taking hold there?
Well, I mean, everywhere. I mean, the discounting is very severe in the UK. I walked Oxford Street yesterday, lots of special offers, and it's growing in Europe as well. I think the discounts are particularly deep in the UK because, life is very tough for retailers here.
Yeah, and that doesn't help when you have to discount. The margins, well, they suffer. But also suffering, you write, is potentially the environment, and we're getting some pushback against a Black Friday over there.
That's right. I mean, this is really happening in France, where there's a movement, Block Friday, Extinction Rebellion, is leading this, but it's really gaining traction. I have to say, when I was on Oxford Street, I didn't see many people caring about the environment. They were really just caring about savings. But it is something that is growing, concern about overconsumption. This idea of sort of consumer shame really does seem to be taking hold.
Well, that's downright un-American. Is it really bad for the environment when I go shopping?
Well, it depends how you shop. I mean, this is quite surprising, but if you shop purely online, if you buy something at your computer, you have it delivered to your door, that is actually less bad for the environment than going to a shop and buying it because you're ordering it with your mouse or your smartphone, and it's being brought to you directly in probably what is a very efficient delivery method. Now, that all changes when we take into account very fast delivery, which is less efficient, returns if you order something online and drive to a shop to pick it up, and if you do something that's known as showrooming, where you go to a store, you have a look around, you compare prices, and then you order it at home. That all makes online shopping worse for the environment.
Is this really about the environment or just the French being French?
I think it is a much broader movement against overconsumption. We've seen it with flight shame. We've got veganism growing. Primark said in Germany, because they were cheap, some consumers thought they had to be bad for the environment, when actually they've been really working on their sustainability. So this is a broad movement. Saying that, there is definitely a group of consumers who are really engaged in this. Then there are a lot more consumers who can kind of take it or leave it.
Are you going shopping tonight?
No, I went yesterday. I had a look around Oxford Street, but I did buy something on discount, so I engaged in a bit of overconsumption myself.
Shame on you, Andrea. Bloomberg opinion columnist Andrea Felstead joining us from our London bureau. And, of course, you can read more on these and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing OPIN GO. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Joan Doniger.
An unclear legal environment makes it a challenge to provide banking or payment services to CBD merchants. Lawyers say banks need compliance programs tailored for CBD businesses. A federal judge has ruled the government cannot back out of its obligation under a structured settlement to make periodic payments to a man burned as a child on government property. An annuity came up short. And the Fifth Circuit Appeals Court is upholding a job safety citation against a Louisiana scaffolding company. A worker's fall arrest system collapsed. He drowned in Galveston Bay.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
Now to another legal development we're watching. President Trump continuing to reshape the federal appellate judiciary with conservatives at a record pace. At the same time, though, he's failed to appoint enough district court judges, and that's leading to a surge in judicial emergencies, especially in blue states. For more on the story, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with Carl Tobias, a professor of constitutional law at the University of Richmond.
In just 3 years, President Trump has nominated 5 judges out of 12 on the 11th Circuit. And nationwide, he's appointed 48 judges to the appellate courts. By contrast, President Barack Obama appointed 48 judges to the appellate courts during 8 years in office. Have you ever seen such a rapid transformation before?
Well, he has set all records for appellate judges being confirmed, and that has made a difference. More than a quarter of the active judges have been appointed by President Trump with the help of Senator McConnell as the majority leader, and it has flipped 3 of the appeals courts so far, and maybe more. He's appointed, I think, 10 to the Ninth Circuit, which is the bane of his existence, and he's been very critical of that court because it overturns most of his decisions on issues like immigration and other important issues. There's only one appellate vacancy out of 179 nationwide, which gives you a sense, and it hasn't been that low since before Bush took office, probably in the Clinton era or maybe even further back to George H.W. Bush. So that's unbelievable. And there's still 87 district court vacancies. There's still 51 emergency vacancies. And so everything has been done or neglected in order to rapidly approve people for all of the appeals court vacancies.
Why aren't the emergency vacancy spots being filled, and what effect does that have?
Well, one reason is a number of them are in states represented by Democratic senators. For example, there are 13 district court vacancies, all emergencies in California, and the president has confirmed no one to the California courts, and they're under extreme pressure because of the dockets. In New York, a very similar situation, though he has noticed up votes on some of those nominees the week they return in early December, so that will help. But there are currently 12 vacancies, 8 of which are emergencies in New York. New Jersey has 6 emergencies, and the president has nominated no one so far for any of those vacancies. So you have courts that are in extreme situations. The pressure is just unbearable for judges in those states.
And that is University of Richmond law professor Carl Tobias speaking with Bloomberg's June Grosso. You can catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast. You can download the show at bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at bloomberglaw.com. Ahead of the Black Friday shortened trading day on Wall Street, futures are edging lower. S&P futures are down 7 points. Dow futures down 58. NASDAQ futures down 26 points. The 10-year is up 230 seconds. Yield on a 10-year Treasury note 1.75%. The 2-year is at 1.61%. NYMEX crude oil, little change, down 2 cents, $58.09 a barrel. The euro at 1.1004 against the dollar, and the yen at 109.55. Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We heart in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
There is simply nothing else like it. Giraffe strut, birds swoop, gazelles leap. And as the music soars, the entire Serengeti comes to life around you. This is Disney's The Lion King. Experience it at London's Lyceum Theatre. Visit thelionking.co.uk.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
From the financial capital